Good morning and welcome to Cradle-to-Career's Governing Board meeting. My name is Amy Fong and I am the chair of the Governing Board. As a reminder, today's meeting will be run according to Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act as required by law. We don't have a slide on the agenda, but there is one in your board packet. We do have a very full agenda today and plan to end today's meeting in the late afternoon. So kind of looking through the items here, we'll anticipate about a 10-minute break mid-morning and then a 30-minute or so break for lunch later in the day. So next slide. Before we get the meeting started, I wanted to make a quick note about translation services. To listen to comments given in Spanish, please select the globe icon at the bottom of the screen that says interpretation. Then select language interpretation audio and your language is just Spanish. Then you will hear a live rendering of the comment in Spanish. I'll pause for a moment for our interpreter to translate.
Thank you, Chair Fong. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Muy buenos días a todos. Bienvenidos a la reunión de hoy. Me llamo Aldo y junto con mi colega Janet estaremos proporcionando servicios de interpretación. En breve, usted verá en la parte inferior de su pantalla un icono en forma de un mundo. Por favor, presione ese icono y después usted verá una palabra que es Spanish o español. Favor de elegir el idioma de su preferencia. Después presione nuevamente el icono y elegir el audio original para que pueda escuchar la reunión en español en su totalidad. Si tiene algún problema técnico, favor de escribirlo en el casillero o alzar su mano y con mucho gusto lo apoyaremos. Durante comentarios públicos se les pide de la manera más atenta que por favor hablen pausadamente porque estaremos interpretando sus comentarios en vivo. Si tiene algún problema, nuevamente favor de alzar su mano y con mucho gusto lo apoyaremos. Gracias por asistir y que tenga una muy buena reunión. Back to you, Chair Fong. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aldo. I would like to call the meeting to order at 9:36 and ask that Mary Catherine Cruz-Jones, Mary Kate, please call the roll.
Amy Fong.
Here.
Robert Tagorda.
Here.
Londe Jose. Sylvia Alva.
Here.
Marisa Lavina.
Here.
Catalina Cifuentes. Debbie Cochran.
Here.
David DeGear.
Present.
Sean Elo Rivera.
Present.
Chris Ferguelli.
Here.
John Hetz.
Present.
Jackie Irwin.
Cassandra Marr, present alternate for Miss Jackie Irwin.
Perfect. Cassandra Marr, to have your name officially on the record. Thank you. Sujin Jazz.
Here.
Michelle Reyes, alternate for John Laird.
Here.
Meredith Lee.
Here.
Jessica Moldoff.
Here.
John Ohanian.
Here.
Gavin Payne.
Here.
Javier Romero.
Here.
Tom Vu.
Here.
And Jerry Winkler.
Here.
We have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. Next slide. All right, so we are moving on to agenda item 2, the approval of the minutes from the February 8th Governing Board meeting. Do we have any additions or corrections to the February 8th, 2023 meeting minutes from our Governing Board members? All right, hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the February board minutes as submitted?
So moved.
All right, I have David with the first and Gavin with the second is I think what I heard. Before we take action, let's go ahead and pause for public comment. Mary Kate?
We'll now be opening it up for public comment. Just a quick note to the public. If anyone would like to comment, please raise your hand using the button at the bottom of the screen. During the public comment period, I will unmute you, which will allow you to be able to speak. You will have 2 minutes to comment, and you will see a little icon, if technology agrees with me, in my space, and that will start the 2-minute timer. So please just be aware of that. And we'd also like to flag that while C2C does promote communication and transparency, governing board members and staff are not required to respond to public comment and may not discuss or act on any matter raised during the public comment period that is not included on the agenda. We will start that now. So I will be opening it up to attendees, providing a moment. Thus far, I'm not seeing any hands raised. Okay. Amy, if you're okay with it, I think we could close public comment. I'm not seeing anything coming through.
All right, so we have a motion to approve the minutes as submitted, forwarded by David DeGear and seconded by Gavin Payne. Mary Kate, would you please do a roll call vote?
Perfect. Amy,
Yes.
Robert,
Yes.
Sylvia,
Yes.
Marisol,
Yes.
Catalina. My apologies, Catalina and Londe are not with us. For clarity of record, they have been mentioned. Debbie.
Yeah.
David.
Yes.
Sean.
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
John Hetz.
Yes.
Jackie.
Yes.
Sujin.
Yes.
Michelle the alternate for John Laird.
Yes.
Meredith.
Yes.
Jessica.
Yes.
John Ohanian.
Yeah.
Gavin.
Yes.
Javier.
Yes.
Tom.
Abstain?
Thank you. And Jerry.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes.
Thank you. So just to recap, I have 1 abstention, I have 2 absent, and the rest are yes, so the motion passes. So moving on to agenda item 3, we have a presentation of certificate for service to Sylvia Alva, who is departing our governing board. So I would like to take a moment here to recognize Sylvia Alva, who will be departing the board. Sylvia began her service last year as a governing board member and also serves on the ad hoc committee for the selection of advisory boards. Her leadership and guidance on the board has been invaluable. Most recently, Sylvia has been working as the Executive Vice Chancellor of Academic and Student Affairs for Cal State University. Prior to that, she was Provost and Vice President of Academic Affairs at Cal Poly Pomona. In her role as Provost, she led the strategic and academic direction of the campus's Division of Academic Affairs, and she also held a faculty appointment in the psychology department. Sylvia began her career in higher education as an assistant professor of child and adolescent development before being promoted to associate professor and professor at CSU Fullerton. She was also the Dean of the College of Health and Human Development at CSU Northridge. She's been appointed as the interim president of CSU Fullerton and will begin this new position in August. So we wish Sylvia all the best in her future endeavors, and she will truly be missed on our governing board and ad hoc committee. The governing board would like to thank you so much for your service and expertise. Sylvia, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you so much for this certificate of recognition. I appreciate and have enjoyed the time I've spent with the governing board, and have learned a lot and have been inspired about what the board, under very capable leadership and strong office as it's growing, is envisioning for California and the benefits that this integrated approach to data and informing and being of service to communities, I think is really a exciting and very transformational endeavor. As was shared earlier, I have the privilege of returning back to my first professional home. I started at Fullerton in 1989, a long time ago, and look forward to serving as their interim president. And I also want to share with you that serving as this Cal State University representative will be Dr. Nathan Evans, who many of you know. He has really strong connections and ties to intersegmental partners, and I know you will enjoy working with him, and he brings a wealth of experience and a shared commitment to really creating much more equitable outcomes for our students. So thank you for the privilege and the opportunity to have served in this role. It's been a delight.
Well, congratulations once again, and thank you, Sylvia. I've really appreciated our conversations over this last year, and especially your contributions that really relate to the students themselves. So thank you. All right. So the next agenda item is item 4, update on the Cradle-to-Career office. We'll go ahead and turn it over to Marianne Bates, our executive director.
Thank you so much. Next slide, please. So I'm excited to begin my update this morning with good news, and that is to announce that as of yesterday, the California Department of Education executed a formal data sharing agreement with California Colleges at EDU, with CCGI, and this agreement will provide universal free basic accounts to all 6th to 12th grade students in California's public schools beginning by fall 2024. And the heart of our work here at Cradle-to-Career lies in the linking of data across institutions, and we're thrilled about this progress as we all work together to build more equitable futures for students in the state. So I know this data sharing agreement reflects many months of work, and it's really exciting to celebrate CDE's and CCGI's milestone today together. And as an additional update, you can see here on the slide some numbers as it relates to California Colleges' continued scaling and reach across the state. So they currently have 196 districts under contract. This represents about half of all 6th to 12th grade students in public schools. And they have another 45 districts in the onboarding queue coming up. So we're encouraged by that continued scaling. The other thing I wanted to flag, as I had previewed in our last meeting in February, we're holding focus groups currently on the scope of eTranscript California, the second practical tool for students that's named in our legislation, in addition to California Colleges at EDU. So we're working in partnership with WestEd to hold focus groups about eTranscript, and have gotten great input from the Community College Chancellor's Office on that as well. And we'll report out on that in more detail at our August meeting. Next slide. Now I'll give an update on where we are with our analytical data. And I'm going to keep this fairly brief and high level, because later in today's agenda, you're going to hear directly from our Director of Data Infrastructure, Dan Lamoury. And you'll also hear from my colleagues, Ryan Estriado and Shannon Serrato as well. So I'm going to keep some of my updates this morning fairly high level. So on the linked analytical data set, remember, this is what provides the foundation for the dashboards, for the query builder, for the research data request process. We're preparing for file transfer. Our contractors are working to build the data infrastructure to get ready to receive the data. And important work is happening with the Security Policies Task Force. And many thanks to our data partners, our data providers, whose chief information security officers have been dedicated participants of that task force. Next slide. I want to give you an update on the progress board that I had shared in February. So if you'll recall, this is what I'll show in a moment is the board that shows where we are with the steps that need to be done to prepare to transfer data from our data partners to Cradle-to-Career. And these steps include things like finalizing data definitions and mapping specifically the data elements that are in the participation agreement to specific fields that our data partners have. So if you can go to the next slide, this is what the board looked like in February. This is what I showed you at our February meeting. which had already shown a lot of progress and engagement from our data partners. And if you can go to the next slide, this is where the progress board is today. So we're very encouraged by this. We've worked with all of the data partners who will be submitting data in the first round. As I mentioned in February, there are a few data partners who will be submitting data at a later phase. But at each of the green bubbles here and also the ones in progress reflect a lot of dedicated work between our technical teams and our data providers' technical teams, and a lot of collaboration on coming to agreement and alignment as questions come up. So a huge thank you to our partners for the progress on this. Next slide, please. I want to highlight a couple of recent community events and presentations. On March 8th, we held a public community conversation that focused on disaggregating data for equity, and it featured two of our advisory board members, Drs. Christopher Nellam and Vikash Reddy. And if you haven't seen that, I encourage you to check out the recording. I really enjoyed the conversation and I learned a lot from it. We also had a group of our staff and board members and former board member Patrick Perry, along with Sujan Jez and Ryan and Shannon on our team, attended a SHIO convening that was focused on higher education funding formulas. And we also recently, together with our colleagues at CCGI, presented at the California Education Policy Fellowship Program as well. Next slide. A few quick updates on the budget. As I shared with you in February, we do have a BCP, a budget change proposal that was included in the governor's January 10th budget. We've now had two hearings, one in the Senate and one in the Assembly. And as you're aware, soon the May revised budget will be released as well. So we'll keep you updated and informed as we learn more and the budget process proceeds. A few updates on procurements that have occurred since we last spoke. So you can see on the slide here a number of recently completed procurements, including identity access management, website design, user experience and user interface. And we have a number that are open and planned. So the student experience researcher for that annual student experience audit that we're required to do, interpreting and translation to be able to continue to provide the live translation that we have in today's meeting, as well as graphic design. I want to highlight a few recent hires. So first I'll start, you've already met her, but I would like to invite Mary Kate Cruz-Jones to unmute and introduce ourselves. She's our new Chief of Strategic Initiatives and Partnerships and spearheads all things related to the board. So welcome, Mary Kate.
Hi, good morning, members. My name is Mary Kate, and I'm very appreciative of this new opportunity to join the C2C team. I wanted to share a little bit about myself just to give you some background. I began my state career with the Medical Board of California as the board member liaison, and most recently I worked at the Department of Consumer Affairs, where I led data initiatives and performed data analysis and collection for all 37 boards and bureaus under the department. I also spearheaded many special projects for the department's board and bureau relations, such as board member orientation training and a training for board leadership in terms of best practices for running a public meeting. So very excited to be here and a part of the team and look forward to working with you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary Kate. And we're thrilled to have her on board to work with all 53 of our board members across you as a governing board and our two advisory boards. Next, I'm also thrilled to announce that Julia Blair has joined us as General Counsel and Chief Privacy Officer. Julia, please feel free to introduce yourself.
Hello, good morning, members. My name is Julia Blair. I recently joined, I think it's been 5 weeks, and my most recent agency was the California Student Aid Commission, but most of my 15 years in state service have been in the realm of education policy and higher education specifically. So before I was at the California Student Aid Commission, I was at the Office of Legislative Counsel, where I drafted primarily an education code and higher education code. I also spent some time at the Community College Chancellor's Office, and I started my state career at the California Post-Secondary Education Commission. So I've spent a long time working on data sharing agreements, privacy-related matters, particularly with education law and financial aid data. I actually worked on a longitudinal data system work group back when I was at CPEC many years ago. So this is an area where I've had a lot of familiarity and experience in the past, and I'm looking forward to working with some of you who I've probably worked with in different capacities and continuing to serve in terms of trying to get our longitudinal data system running. I also have a lot of experience working with boards and commissions, so if there's any questions regarding Bagley-Keene, conflict of interest, Form 700, I'm here to support the board in that way too. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Julia. We're delighted to have her depth of experience on our team and here ready to serve your needs as well. Our next two hires, I'm going to wait and they will introduce themselves as a part of Dan's update later today, but we're really thrilled to have Mike Araki as our new Chief Information Security Officer and Moni Chitneni as our new Principal Data Architect, two key members of Dan's team, and they'll be introducing themselves during his update. Hiring. Per usual, we have positions that have recently closed, we have positions that are open, and positions that will be opening soon. So recently closed and in process, 2 deputy director positions and a research manager position. We currently have a budget analyst position open. This is a great opportunity for someone who's interested in financial planning and all things fiscal within the state. So please do help spread the word about that. We also have a number of positions that will be opening soon, a deputy director for legislative affairs and an executive office analyst. That position will work very closely with me as my assistant. And we also have a senior data engineer position as well that will be opening soon. So just want to again thank you, so many of you as board members, and those of you who are listening from the public who followed our work have played a very crucial role in getting the word out about each of these positions, pushing them proactively to your networks, encouraging people to apply. That's been absolutely crucial to the strong team that we've been able to build so far. So thank you for that, and a request to please continue amplifying our posts and messages about the positions that we continue to hire as we staff up. I want to flag our upcoming meetings. Our next governing board meetings will be August 9th and November 1st. I also wanted to flag the next advisory board meetings, and in particular, thank our data providers. On June 6th, we will be having a combined meeting of both advisory boards in response to an idea that came from our advisory boards, which is to provide an opportunity for them to learn more about our data providers' data. So that'll be an opportunity for them to ask questions and understand how to navigate information about the data that our data providers are giving to Cradle-to-Career and the P20W data set about their data more broadly. So we've invited our data providers to have subject matter experts attend that meeting, and just a huge thank you to them for taking the time to do so. Next slide. Important note about our upcoming meetings. After July 1st, all of our board meetings and all of our ad hoc committee meetings will be in person. So the pandemic exception to Bagley-Keene that has enabled us to host some meetings virtually as we are today is expiring. And I just wanted to flag this for everyone. So we'll be back to having our meetings in person in Sacramento. For members of the public listening in, I do want to state that we are planning to still broadcast our meetings via Zoom and enable you to provide public comment via Zoom, even after we have all of our meetings in person for the board members. We want to make sure that we continue to be as transparent as possible and welcome your input, including when it's not easy or convenient to be in Sacramento. So I wanted to share that note as well. And with that, I'm happy to turn it back over to Amy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary Ann. I just took a quick note here when you were talking about your hiring process. And I did want to mention an opening that's going to be coming up for the board, and that is going to be the chair-elect role. And so statements of interest for the chair-elect role will be due July 24th. And I also want to encourage the members here to think about serving in that capacity. So given that, are there any questions or comments for Mary Ann? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to the next agenda item. This is going to be a very informative session, I hope. Our next agenda item is item 5, presentation and discussion on administrative burden and its connection to the Cradle-to-Career endeavors. Last meeting, we had a wonderful opportunity to learn from LRI, the 5 habits of highly effective boards, and to participate in an activity that is helping to guide us toward greater cohesion as a board. Shared understanding is really important in working together effectively, relationship building, all of that toward achieving, these big, hairy, audacious goals, like this one-of-a-kind data system that we are building. So today we have the privilege of having the authors of Administrative Burden with us. Sorry, I lost my place. They will be helping us to gain additional context and background as we help move forward together to ensure the system is of service to the people of California. So before I invite Professors Hurd and Moynihan to present, here's just some brief background for our board members and the public. Pamela Hurd's research focuses on inequality and how it intersects with health, aging, and policy. As we will also hear today, she does research on administrative burden, or the bureaucratic obstacles that people encounter when trying to access government benefits, services, and rights. She's especially interested in how this burden is both shaped by and further reinforces inequality. Donald Moynihan is the inaugural McCourt Chair at the McCourt School of Public Policy. His research seeks to improve how government works. He examines the behavioral effects of efforts to improve public sector outcomes through government reform, as well as administrative burdens people encounter in their interactions with the government. So additional information about our presenters is available in their biographies in the board materials. I'll go ahead and turn it over now to Professors Hurd and Moynihan.
Hi, thank you so much for having us. We're happy to be here today and talk a little bit about burden. I am going to start and then Don is going to take the second half of the talk. So let me just get my slides up and I will get rolling here. Okay, sorry. There we go. Okay. So broadly, as was already actually well defined, administrative burdens are these kind of negative interactions basically people have when interacting with government, trying to access benefits or services. They're this, the experience you might have at maybe at your local DMV, for example, waiting in line a long time or having to pay a lot of fees or fill out a lot of complicated forms. And we were interested in exploring this topic basically because we think it's sort of central as a way to kind of understand whether government is working well or not. So the outline for the talk today is I'm going to talk first briefly about what are administrative burdens. We're going to talk a little bit about why they matter. We'll talk briefly about policy changes at the federal level that are intended to reduce burdens, as well as kind of different kinds of tools you can employ to reduce them specifically. So when we started writing on this topic, our kind of normative goals, basically, in terms of how we thought about this, was we wanted people's views and experiences when they interact with government to be positive. And the way that we were thinking about that is that people should experience their interactions with government as simple. It should be accessible, and those interactions should be respectful. And so those were kind of three kind of normative goals for us, at least, in terms of how we thought about this topic. The concept itself, when we came to this, it wasn't that there weren't people thinking about or generically writing about these kinds of negative interactions, but there wasn't really a language, kind of universal language that we could use to talk about them specifically. So a central goal for us was to provide that language. And part of the reason we wanted to provide that language was, one, because it's really hard to fix problems that you can't specifically identify. And if we have a common language, we can kind of point all of us across a range of different policy domains. We're talking about education today, but you can see this in almost any policy domain. A kind of shared language to talk about it. And the concept in particular that we came up with defines burden as having sort of three different kinds of costs: learning costs, compliance costs, and psychological costs. And I'll walk through each of those. But part of the advantage too to this framework is not just sort of identifying them, but if you can identify what's a learning cost or what's a compliance cost or what's a psychological cost, it also provides you the first step to actually identifying an intervention to fix that burden too. Okay, so let me talk a little bit more specifically about these. So learning costs are the kind of challenges that people have when they're engaging in search processes to collect information about public services or benefits and how they're relevant to the individual. So to give you one very specific example here, one thing that we know in higher education is that there's this sort of disconnect in that low-income, high-performing students are substantially less likely to attend very highly selective competitive colleges. So in your system, like UC Berkeley, UCLA. And one of the reasons why that happens is because they often don't actually realize that they can effectively have their tuition costs fully covered via, a mix of financial aid and scholarships. So they don't realize like what the actual price of the college attendance will be. So this is a team at the University of Michigan led by Sue Donarski, who is actually now on the faculty at Harvard. But University of Michigan, their Ann Arbor campus, did this experiment where basically they identified high-performing low-income students throughout the state of Michigan. And they did a randomized controlled trial. So for a treatment group, they mailed, for the control group, the students got the kind of information they would typically get about the University of Michigan. The treatment group were mailed a letter where they were effectively told, look, you don't need to fill out any forms. If you apply and get in and are admitted, the cost of your schooling will be free. So, and they did this in such a way so that they knew basically everyone in these sort of treatment and control groups would be fully eligible to have the costs of their college fully covered. But they just made it they reduced the learning costs, basically. They made it super clear to people. And the impacts of this program were really, really large. So this is among a group of low-income students. And effectively, enrollment in this group at the University of Michigan in the treatment group was 3 times as high as in the control group. So 27% compared to 12%. So this was a huge effect. And they did also look at applications, and you kind of saw this basically at every stage of the process. It had a huge impact. And mostly what they were doing was just reducing learning costs. Compliance costs, I think, are what we often more typically think of if we think about administrative burden or red tape in government, right? It's paperwork, it's the time you spend doing it, it's all those sorts of things. So it's these sort of costs of following administrative rules and requirements. We know these matter a lot too. And also there's a bunch of evidence around different areas in higher ed where we see this. So the study I'm going to reference here was another randomized controlled trial that some folks did working with H&R Block, right, the tax preparation firm. And what they basically did was, again, among actually lower income individuals, they randomized, and with the treatment group, they actually had the tax preparer tell them and then assist them in filling out the FAFSA form, right, the financial aid eligibility form. The control group, there were actually 2 arms. The key point, though, actually, is that it wasn't enough to just like tell people like you should fill out this form because you can get a lot of aid this way and your kid can go to college. The key was actually assisting those individuals in really filling out the forms. And the result was a 34% versus 27% difference in college attendance. Sorry, what I mean is 34% of the parents who had kids in the treatment group, they got the assistant, 34% of their kids went to college versus 27% in the control group. And the size of this difference held 3 years into college, right? So 3 years post-college, you still saw this big difference in terms of who was actually enrolled in college. So the effects here were pretty large, effectively by just helping people fill out a form, right? The last category that we focus on are psychological costs. And so typically when people think about social welfare programs, probably less this happens in education policy, but we often think about stigma, like we don't want to make people feel bad, or we don't want to stigmatize, for example, low-income populations who are eligible for poverty-based programs. But oftentimes the effects of these psychological costs are much larger associated with burden. And they affect things like your stress, your fear, your frustration, even a sense of kind of loss of control or loss of autonomy. And so the example I wanted to pull out actually was this woman, Lizzie Chauvin. She's in her early 20s, a student at Florida State, and she is an independent student. So she's estranged from both of her parents. I think she was effectively abandoned. And so she talked about her experiences with a financial aid office throughout her time in college. So she'd show up with all the forms to demonstrate that she was an independent student. And she talked about kind of every semester she went through the same process. She'd show up with everything that they asked for, but then she'd be in a situation where she kind of had to reiterate once again the sort of horrendous reality of her kind of lived experience, which is this terrible estrangement from her parents. And so this is just a quote from her in terms of her experience of that process. You know, I didn't know what to expect the first time I stepped in, but I thought it would kind of be the easiest part, right? But that was not her experience. And she talks about this, you know, who knew I would be bawling in front of a stranger, telling them about one of my most humiliating and heartbreaking experiences of my life. And to emphasize again, she had to do this every semester, right? So that's the kind of psychological burden. And you see this in a lot of programs that can really negatively affect people's experiences. I'm going to pass along to Don now, who's going to talk a little bit more about why burdens matter.
Hi, everyone. So you should already have a sense of why burdens matter here, but we think there are 3 big points to remember. First is that it's easy for us as individuals to think that a couple of extra questions or an additional form or adding more documentation might be a little bit of a hassle, but won't make that big of a difference. And some of the examples that Pam presented to you, plus one other that I'll present before we finish, I think give light to that claim in that they show that sometimes little hassles can make an enormous difference when it comes to access. The second point is that these burdens may not be distributed evenly. They may fall heavier on the shoulders of some people and some groups more than others. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One is that people who have less resources are going to be more dependent, often on means-tested or eligibility-based programs. So for example, if you have a family income that puts you well above eligibility for student aid, you don't experience that administrative set of burdens that comes with applying for student aid. But if you are dependent on those resources, you're going to become much more familiar with bureaucracy as a result. Another reason why burdens might facilitate patterns of inequality is that people who have less financial resources, less educational resources, weaker social networks, or are in poor health, tend to be less successful when it comes to completing forms or following through on administrative processes. So for example, a recent paper we worked on showed that when people experience poorer health, especially mental health, they were simply less likely to complete application processes and receive benefits that they were eligible for. And the third point here is this is partly about democracy. The experience of applying for programs or dealing with administrative hassles is one of the most tangible ways that we experience government in everyday life. And so, you know, we often think about democracy in terms of elections and voting, but these administrative experiences are also the way in which people encounter government, and they have a lasting effect on how people think about not just that particular institution, but government more generally. Up to relatively recently, there hadn't been a great deal of attention to this topic, either in research or in policy practice, or it was somewhat fragmented and scattered. This is starting to change. In particular, during the Biden administration, we're seeing a fairly aggressive push to pay attention to administrative burdens. There's a couple of executive orders that are relevant in this area. One was a day one executive order that President Biden signed to deal with inequality, where he drew a link between making public services more accessible and dealing with inequality more generally. And then later in December of 2021, an executive order that centered on what's called federal customer experience and service delivery. And so it's under the guise of customer experience, but then when you read the order and you read the guidance that flows from the Office of Management and Budget, there's a lot of additional detail there. Indeed, all agencies via the order are asked, especially if they have client-facing services, to identify customer life experiences and find ways to reduce burdens in those experiences. And they have to report back to OMB each year on how they're doing with this. In another part of OMB, the Office of Information Regulatory Assessment, which oversees the Paperwork Reduction Act, is also providing guidance to agencies and also people who receive federal funds about how to better measure, identify, and reduce administrative burdens. So at least for the last couple of years, there has been this sea change in the federal government where there is this authority now that tells agencies you need to think about red tape from the perspective of the public, not just dealing with it within government. How this will be implemented, I think, is going to depend a lot on agency by agency conditions and leadership interest in this. But there is at least authority and sort of a green light to work in this area. And when it comes to dealing with burdens, I think this is something that we'll get into in the sort of breakout discussions. But I wanted to highlight some of the basic tools in the toolbox. And maybe the most obvious one are nudges. And so if you've read the book Nudge, or if you've heard about nudges, doing things like sending someone a text message to remind them that you're eligible for a service or benefit, or that a deadline for something is coming up, or sending them a text where they can digitally upload information that they need to qualify for a service. Those are a very popular tool to make services more accessible. They work especially well in conditions where learning costs is a big problem, where people are unaware or forgetful. They work less well in conditions where people are aware that they're eligible for services, but the procedures themselves remain incredibly complicated. And so the FAFSA example that Pam spoke about earlier, one of the treatment conditions in that experiment was that people were told, hey, you're eligible for FAFSA and here's the form, but they weren't given additional help. And simply telling people about that eligibility did not by itself improve outcomes for them. So a second approach is that you change your administrative processes to make them simpler. You think about what's necessary and what's not. You think about the level of documentation that's required. A third approach is that you rely on third parties to provide help. So in cases where you can't change the administrative process, you ask third parties to provide a helping hand. We do this in different ways. The Affordable Care Act maybe most famously did this by hiring navigators. But sometimes, for example, if you're a veteran and you live in a state that has a very strong Veterans Association, we know that you're going to be much more successful in getting veterans benefits because you can turn to this network of supportive actors that you are connected to. The other solution that we're interested in is how do you shift burdens away from the individual and onto the state? And here we're thinking about things like auto enrollment. So if people are eligible, that you change the default from opt in to opt out. or something that falls short of that. And I'll give you an example of pre-filled forms in a second. But as we think about these different tools, all of them depend upon a certain set of organizational, governmental, and political supports or culture that is interested in actually making services easier. And it's hard to get too far if there is a lot of political opposition to what you're doing. But even with political support, organizational capacity and culture is still going to matter. And all of these things, I think, have to be aligned to a certain degree. The final example I'll leave you with comes from another experiment that looked at the effect of payments and income-driven repayment plans. And so this is a way of paying back your student loans, which tends to be much more efficient from a cost perspective for people who've taken those loans. But the issue is getting people to sign up for these IDR loans relative to their traditional loans. And one experiment sent out what were essentially just pre-filled forms to eligible individuals. So they got an email with the form. The only thing they had to do was sign and return the form. And so it reduced a lot of the learning costs and compliance costs and psychological costs. It made it like a very simple process to enroll. And that increased take-up from about 24% to just over 62%. It had this enormous impact. And so again, it's an example of how using administrative data, you've identified who's eligible, reducing burdens by pre-filling the forms, and reaching out to people can have these very dramatic effects on whether they participate or gain access to a program that's better for them. So we are going to finish there, and we're looking forward to the discussion to come.
Thank you so much, Professors Hurd and Moynihan, for that informative presentation in a relatable way that really resonates with the vision that we have for the data system. We have a few more pieces to bring into the conversation from some additional presenters, so let's kind of hold questions to the end. Now that the Professors Hurd and Moynihan have provided us with an introduction on the research, normative goals, and learning, and sort of the learning, compliance, and psychological concepts behind administrative burden, let's take a look at, how that applies in real life, some tools and treatments, and how we might reduce that burden. So let's find out from Jackie Navarez from Sacramento City Unified School District, who serves on our Community Engagement Advisory Board, on how administrative burden shows up in our context. Jackie?
Thank you so much, Chairperson Fong and Governing Board, for the offer to share with our community my practical experiences using californiacolleges.edu to reduce the administrative burden with A through G course alignment. So before I begin, I must note that unlike other districts, I have been fortunate to work in a district who has directors that understand A through G alignment and can create clean data systems. But unfortunately, that's not the case in all of our districts. We oftentimes have districts who don't have technologically the ability to create clean data systems, nor have A through G proficient staff. So I'm hoping that I can showcase here today why californiacolleges.edu really is a resource for our underinformed and underrepresented districts. So let me set the problem scenario for you first. So we're looking at the administrative burden of helping our students to complete their college applications, which means they're putting into the college application their A through G courses. So be mindful that to be eligible for admission for our four-year colleges in California, students need to complete a 15-course sequence known as A through G with grade C- or better. So these courses, though, are listed differently in our K through 12 student information systems than they are on our course management portal. Now, this course management portal is the guide of truth. It's the base of how we determine whether something is A through G or not. And so our college applications, our CSU or UC applications, use the data from the course management portal to create options in their drop-down menus in their application. The challenge comes is when discrepancies arise for our students. So they are trying to enter in their courses and they don't see them very clearly just demonstrated in the application. And so this creates, as our presenters were sharing, a lot of cost, right? So we're looking at the cost of the anxiety and the stress on the family and the students when They've taken the classes, they've been told they're A through G eligible, and they don't see their class there. It also is an administrative cost for our post-secondary partners because our admissions representatives have to then evaluate and decide whether the student is meeting their A through G requirements. And unfortunately, this does mean that there are times when our students have been told they're A through G eligible from their high schools, and they are actually not, in fact, A through G eligible because those courses haven't been properly aligned with our course management portal. So I'd like to walk you through what that experience feels like for students and families. So all of our governing board members should have received a copy of an official transcript and a high school a document that represents what an application would look like. Both of these are mock-ups. Please note, this is not a real transcript. This is not real information. So we're not breaking any FERPA rules here. So please note that this is an example of, for our California colleges, public four-year college applications on your right-hand side and the transcript on the left. So let's dive down. We'll go underneath freshman, sophomore into junior. So we're going to look at the junior year. So for my governing board members and our community members, please look at that section right there. And I'm going to ask for our governing board members to unmute themselves and let me know when we're looking at U.S. history 1 and 2, you see on the screen in area A, what would be the course that you would select for your U.S. history 1 and 2? So please unmute. Oh, we're already getting some stuff. So if you'll see on the screen here, it says area A, history, social science. So you have the option of U.S. history 1 and 2 or AP U.S. history. Well, U.S. history 1 and 2 is what it says on my transcript. That's what I'm going to select. So that seems like it goes pretty well. Now let's go on to our English. So I'm looking on underneath my junior year and I see English 3, I got an A. Okay, so I'm going to look on my high school coursework and my college application. I checked under area B. Let's see, I'm going to start typing in English 3. Oh, great, English 3 came up. So I'm able to select that. Good, I'm good to go. Breathe. Now, okay, I'm going to go ahead and pop over into my chemistry. So we look here and I have on my transcript, chemistry H, A, and B. So if you look under area D, lab sciences, you can imagine what it would be like if our students or families, they type in CHEM HA/B. The 3 selections down below are all they have to choose from. Which one is it? Is it chemistry AB? That H might be important. Guess what? That actually means honors in most schools. That's really important. Is it advanced? Advanced chemistry AB sometimes doesn't give it the honors bump. What about H chemistry AB? Ooh, now you're starting to see how challenging it can be. Let's go a little bit deeper. Let's look at heritage Spanish. I've typed in heritage Spanish, and these are my options. Advanced topics in Spanish, Spanish 11, accelerated Spanish. Does anyone want to take a guess what they would pick? It's a challenge, right? You don't see heritage Spanish there. So imagine heritage Spanish is often our native Spanish speakers. So they've taken heritage Spanish, they've met the requirement for language other than English, but they don't see the class to pick from in their application. We'll go ahead and go on just to continue just a little bit more so you have that experience, because thinking about this for our parents and students, they have to do this every single semester for their freshman year, their sophomore year, and their junior year. So 6 times they're going to have to select this. And no matter, all these classes they've taken, maybe 6 classes, maybe 8 classes. Let's look at area F. So that's visual and performing arts. So we have, as you can see, character. So CHAR and scene. So that's character and scene. But when I'm in my college application, I only see acting, scene, study 1, or acting basics, creating character. I do not know what to pick if I'm a parent. I do not know what to pick if I'm a student. But that's really important, because if I haven't met that area F requirement, I'm not eligible for a four-year college. Looking at the next and last selection is Med Science 2. So I type in MED, SCI 2, and the only options I have available are biology med and clinical med science. So I hope you can see that this process is not straightforward. There is an administrative burden, not only on our students, but our families, as well as those who are receiving these college applications, and they're hoping to interpret these students as being A through G eligible, and really they're getting something inaccurate. So I just want everyone to be aware that when our students are using californiacolleges.edu, it really does allow them to take this guesswork out of it. Allows them to take the family guesswork out of it. Especially myself, I was first generation. When I had to complete this, I was very insecure. I didn't necessarily think that I belonged. I didn't have a parent to help me. And I can tell you time and time again, I've seen students who don't even know, they get frustrated, they give up, they think they're not supposed to be there. And so that's one of the aspects that I really respect and appreciate California Colleges allowing our students to have that experience, that they don't have to worry and guess. Yes, board member John Hetz.
Yeah, can I just say thank you for going through that. And I just want to note that because they didn't have an 11th grade math course, you didn't cover the chaos of both the math sequences and the math nomenclature for the courses across all of our system. And having had to work with that closely over the past decade, let me tell you that it's just as bad and possibly even worse than some of these examples for students trying to figure out what the abbreviation of their math course is and trying to fit it into our requirements. So just thank you very much. I just wanted to note that took you away from one of the most compelling examples of the problem.
Well, and I think that one of the reasons why we chose that is because it is very complex. You have to look at validation. And so you think about certain levels of math, if taken, will validate a level prior to that. And that is a whole nother coding problem, which californiacolleges.edu actually has solved. And so you are absolutely correct. Similarly with our sciences. Our sciences in our state are not the same for a CSU and a UC. So you can attend a UC with 2 physical sciences, but you cannot attend a CSU with 2 physical sciences. You need to have a biological science and a physical science. So there are even more levels than we shared that californiacolleges.edu solves for our students that they don't even, families don't even know I call it the magic that happens behind. They don't even know that the magic is happening, which is exactly what we want. That administrative burden is not on our families, it's not on our students. And the other aspect is, it used to take 60 to 90 minutes for a counselor to help walk a student through their college application. I can have a classroom of students, 35 in a room, and we can get those students through in like 30 minutes. And it really, especially as we're looking at the burden on our counselors right now, that administrative burden, to be able to provide accurate support for their students in a timely manner means more students are going to get the support they need. So thank you so much, Governing Board, and for our presenters for letting me take the moment to share my experiences. And with that, I'll pass it back to Chair Ms. Fong.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, John, as well. And I just want to make sure that we get all of our presenters in. So we're going to continue to hold questions to the end. Now that we've been provided with this illustration of the A to G alignment in the context of administrative burden, and I imagine as stress or frustration for students and parents, given this concrete problem, let's go ahead and walk through several examples of the fix. First up is Sylvia Alba.
Thank you. Since 2014, the CSU has had a robust partnership with CCGI that's focused on simplifying the admissions process by integrating our application platform, CalState Apply, with CCGI to improve the user experience. What you are about to see has indeed cut in half the time it takes a student to fill out an application to the CSU, because they don't have to deal with some of the complexity and confusion that Ms. Navarez has helped us better understand. Simplifying the process and making it more intuitive also helps our students avoid those feelings of confusion, discouragement, and feeling overwhelmed that really should never be associated with a very exciting chapter in their journey to college. I'd like to also reflect on what this means from a system or an institutional perspective. This resource, this asset, has also provided our universities with transcript level data that they use to make decisions about admissions, but it also allows them to capture key data points that are used in math and English placement. And so having that algorithm built into the system has really facilitated and made more accurate the process of placing students in the appropriate level of these key foundational courses. Next slide.
I'll be playing the video now. Okay, folks can hear me.
Thank you. Yes.
This video will briefly demonstrate the end-to-end process of importing coursework into a Cal State Applied College application. That end-to-end process has 3 steps. First, the student will link their accounts. Second, they will import their coursework. Finally, once the student has submitted the application, the transcript data will be available to CSU campuses. The preferred starting point for this process is by initiating an application to the Cal State system from within a student's account on californiacolleges.edu. Once the accounts are linked, the student will see an import button. The course information from the student's account in californiacolleges.edu, as well as their SSID number, will populate the application. Students can edit schools and courses. However, those edited courses will no longer be transcript verified. The AG matching section will already be filled out for all courses that were A to G matched, corresponding to the green courses in the CSU eligibility tab in californiacolleges.edu, and students will need to match any non-A to G matched courses themselves, those that correspond to the yellow courses in californiacolleges.edu. Once the student has reviewed and submitted an application, the student and course data that make up that application are available to CSU campuses via a tool called WebAdmit. Here, you can see that the coursework that was imported from the student's californiacolleges.edu account shows as official.
Thank you. I'd like to now pass it back to Chair Fong.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. That was a great example, I think, of a fix. Let's go ahead and turn it over to Carrie Stewart for some updates on new efforts. Carrie is the Executive Director of Academic Success Initiatives, University of California Office of the President, Graduate and Undergraduate Equity Affairs. Carrie?
Good morning, Chair Fong and Governing Board members, and thank you so much for the opportunity to provide a quick update on our partnership with CCGI to reduce the administrative burden that we're talking about. I'll begin by saying that UC supports tens of thousands of talented college aspiring students through schools throughout the state each year and has done so for the last half century. Our outreach officers are the ones who are sitting beside students in libraries and in classrooms, helping them to fill out these applications. And so the struggle is real. The tools and functionalities being developed through this effort are a game changer. And we really believe that they will meaningfully ease the way to college, particularly for first-generation students and their families. I am delighted to share that in August 2024, students applying for fall 2025 admission to UC will also have the opportunity to import course data from californiacolleges.edu directly into the UC application. We have begun messaging this good news out to superintendents and principals, to counselors and advisors, and to UC system-wide and campus leaders. And we have a calendar of communications scheduled to help build awareness about the new functionality between now and fall 2024. With that, I'll pass it back to Chair Fong.
Thank you, Carrie, for that update. We like hearing about game changers that reduce friction and make it easier and less stressful for students to apply. So it's really exciting. When we look forward to hearing some more. But first, we have another example of application of this work. So let's hear from Marianne.
Sure, thank you. So we're next going to watch a small video clip that features one of our advisory board members, Tanisha James from Norco College, and it explains a problem and how a single data point from California Colleges.edu can enable her to target interventions. And this is specifically about the challenge of losing students between the time they apply to a community college and the day they show up to their first classes. And colleges often don't have the data they need to target the intervention to students who need it most. So let's take a look at that video.
My name is Tanisha James, and I am currently serving as the Interim Vice President of Planning and Development at Norco College. What we found in really launching our holistic student support data and being able to connect with students early on is that there are key missing pieces for being able to do the type of targeted and intentional outreach, particularly for students who have not had a huge success in their high school experience. So we're talking about students with a 2.5 GPA or less, students that may be first generation college students. They don't always have all of the knowledge and tools that they need to be able to successfully navigate our complex processes. Being able to have that GPA data from CaliforniaColleges.edu, that data would be very helpful in really advancing our equity student success work, because if we know who those students are when they apply, then we can do the targeted outreach directly to those students to get them connected to those wraparound services and support. That includes peer mentoring, dedicated counseling and advising, financial literacy, tutoring, success workshops, early registration, basic needs supports. And typically we lose those students before we even have a chance to connect them to those services that they might benefit from. So being able to do that early outreach that's targeted is really, really critical for our equity work and guided pathways work.
Thank you. So this is an example of one of the many use cases for K-12 transcript information in the higher education system. And as you may know, the Cradle-to-Career legislation requires CCGI to provide K-12 transcript and statewide student identifiers to all public higher education systems to help alleviate some of these challenges. So that work is in the work plan over the next couple of years as well. So with that, I'll pass it back to our chair.
Thank you, Marianne. That was another valuable real-life story that's going to continue to ground us in this work. But wait, there's more. Let's go ahead and hear from Robert Tagorda, incoming chair-elect, or incoming chair, I'm sorry, who will begin to walk us through our third example.
Thank you. In the following example, we have an opportunity to uplift student voice related to an area of tremendous growth in the educational landscape, both here in our state as well as in our country overall. Students who take college credit, also known as dual enrollment coursework, while still in high school, face major challenges in getting accredited when they matriculate to college. First, these courses have to be manually entered into the CSU and UC applications, because those applications for first-time freshmen are drawing from that same CMP database that Jackie was talking about in the previous presentation, which doesn't house dual enrollment coursework. Students must also provide a copy of their transcript from the college from which the credit is being issued. That often entails multiple calls or trips to the registrar of the college, which isn't open during hours that work for high school students, requires payment via credit card students don't have, and aren't terribly responsive in certain cases. Then when students submit their community college transcript, the receiving colleges don't always readily provide credit, depending upon the types and number of courses completed. So to help us illustrate these issues. We have two students here today who can share their own experiences with these challenges. So let me turn it over now to Chair Fong.
Thank you so much, Robert, for setting the stage. Let's connect all of that background that we've just heard with real student experience. I'm really excited to have two students here with us today who can speak to exactly that, their experience. We'll now hear from Sitalik McCoy, a first-year student from CSU San Marcos. Sitalik?
Thank you, Ms. Amy Fung. Hello, members of the board. My name is Sitalik McCoy, and I am a first-year student at San Marcos, and I'm majoring in political science. I'm here to speak about the challenges that I experienced with dual enrollment. During my senior year in high school, I did take political science, which was offered by my local community college, which was MSJC. And originally my school did tell me that they would be able to get all of the coursework credited for us on our transcripts for high school. But as you guys can imagine, that whole story changed for me. And I was told that I would have to get the transcripts on my own and submit them to the colleges that I applied to. And although it doesn't sound like it's that much work that we would have to do, the process is very long and very hard to do if you're a student. First, I couldn't access the online portal for MSJC. And I tried to get help from my high school counselors, but since it's like college application time, they just didn't have that much room for me. They were very busy. And it took several calls to the community college for them to actually send me my transcripts. And I did eventually get access to that portal sooner or later. The next thing is that I had to pay for my transcripts with the credit card, which I did not have. So I had to ask my mom for the credit card, and she had one. But there are students that just, some parents may not have credit cards in order to purchase those transcripts, which means that those students wouldn't be able to get them. And once I ordered the transcripts, I had to wait several weeks to actually get them in my possession. And in my case, I really needed those credits because it would go into my college or like allow me to be eligible for the CSU. And as you probably imagine, I was really stressed out because without these, I wouldn't have been able to apply to San Marcos. To me, it never crossed my mind that like ordering transcripts would like stop my like CSU application and like lengthen that process. The whole process was stressful and confusing and frustrating, and I hope that it will change for the future generations, especially kids who can't advocate for themselves or get the transcripts on their own. And I would like to pass it back to Chair Amy Fong. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Sitalik, for sharing your very powerful story. So stressful and frustrating. We appreciate your time and being with us here today. Now let's go ahead and hear from Mauricio Arias, a fourth-year student at CSU Fresno and participant of the Sacramento Semester Program, intern for Assemblymember Don Addis.
Hello, members. Hello, members of the board. Thank you for also having me here. My name is Mauricio Arias, and I'm a senior at Fresno State. And like Chair Amy Fong said, I'm currently participating at the SAC Semester Program and interning at the Office of Assemblymember Don Addis. Much like Sitalik, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, I'm sorry. The dual enrollment process was challenging and stressful for me. I took a dual enrollment class in my senior year of high school with my cousins and friends. We heard that this was a good way to get some credits under our belts, so we decided to take an intro to nutrition course at a nearby high school to our local community college. So it essentially was like a temporary like campus for them. We all did very well in the course, but when the time to apply to colleges came, I couldn't find a course in the Cal State apply application. Typically on the application, you type in the course name in it, and like we all know, it gets populated with the name. of the approved course. But when the name of the course didn't populate, my only choice was to manually enter the course. And the community college course was not the only course I had trouble inputting. This was also the case with my Math 1 honors course that I took my freshman year of high school. It was not really clear if the courses would be accepted, and it felt like I was submitting an incomplete application. Once I was given provisional acceptance at Fresno State, I found out the nutrition course was not accepted, and there was now a flag on my portal that I needed to get a transcript for the dual enrollment class. So much like Sitlalik described, getting the community college to provide that transcript was a time-consuming process. Not only was it really hard to get in touch with anyone at the community college, it also took a really long time to get the transcript. By the time I received the official transcript, I had to drive 3 hours from Monterey to Fresno State to hand deliver the transcript in order to make sure I could register for my freshman orientation. Although I did have the option to have it mailed directly to the CSU campus, I did not want to risk the transcript getting lost in transit or risk it getting overlooked since the delivery and deadline window was very narrow. I imagine if I didn't have a car or access to a credit card, or the transcript took longer than it did, then I wouldn't be where I am now, speaking to you or with someone this. But the fact is, another student out there could be in the same situation as me without as much luck or resources as I did. It could have been my cousins, my friend, anybody who would have missed out on college education just because they couldn't get a printed transcript in time. I truly hope that there's something that can be done about making this process easier for students, especially those who aren't equipped with the knowledge to navigate these systems that are supposed to serve them instead of potentially harm them. Now, I would like to pass it back to Chair Amy Fong. Thank you.
Thank you, Mauricio, for providing such detailed insight into your experiences and reflections and helping us to connect back to the alignment problem that Jackie Navarez introduced earlier today. We value your story and thank you for providing us the opportunity to hear it today. I'd like to thank all of our wonderful presenters. It's quite enlightening to hear from people who are close to the work about specific problems, some potential treatment or solutions that we can do, and really how all of that relates to our work here at Cradle-to-Career. And along with our partners, we have so many opportunities that will be beneficial for parents and students in the years to come. I'd like to open it up now for member comment and question. Do we have any board members with questions or comments for our speakers? Go ahead and raise your hand or unmute. Sean, I see your hand up. You're still on mute though. Are we able to unmute Sean? There we go.
Can you all hear me?
We can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for this piece of this informational section here. I've mentioned before, I really am trying to approach my participation here and thinking about how we're setting this up to make things easier for folks on the ground. And I think that everything presented here really puts into tangible terms what a big impact this can make. Doing this right can make in the lives of folks. And this is particularly interesting to me where, like, thinking about my role at the community college board that I played prior to serving on city council, and then how people interact with the city and how what might seem like minor barriers to access can play a huge role, not just in what actually gets access from folks, but the belief that folks have in the system. I thought that democracy piece was really important to hear about. And yeah, I really, really appreciated that. We've been having some conversations locally about how availability or eligibility is not the same as access. And simply creating eligibility or availability of a resource is not good enough, because absent access, those resources may as well not exist. And so really, really appreciated hearing all of this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sean. Next up, we have Sujin.
Morning. I just wanted to say how much I appreciated this content and this conversation, both from the academic perspective and then also from folks who are working to address this and those that have been had to grapple with it, and what the Cradle-to-Career data system hopes to achieve. I know the state has spent a lot of time thinking about the design and the components of the data system, and I'm encouraged that we're also thinking about making sure that it's accessible and that Californians can actually use it, because I think that is so important. And when I look across our country around other states, statewide longitudinal data systems, there are many that are pretty amazing, not as amazing as ours will be, but they're not used. And so they describe, the other states describe it, they have a Ferrari in the garage. So, making sure that folks are actually able to drive the Ferrari will be really critical. So I appreciate all the many ways that the staff has been thinking about how do we make sure that the value that we hope for and advocating and that's going on behind the scenes and building this, is realized by Californians in our state. So just wanted to say thank you, and I encourage the team to continue working on this and thinking about this as they are building the system.
Thank you, Sujin. I think I share I share the same feeling with others out there that, maybe we're not after the Ferrari necessarily. We really want something that's practical, drivable, sustainable, all of those good things. So let's make sure that we're working towards that, and we'll iterate and make it better over time. Next up is Jessica.
Hi, thank you. I want to thank all the presenters. Though also to preface this by saying so after reading the blog post and the introduction of the book, which I want to read more of because it's fantastic, especially like as a public servant, it's really inspiring to think about ways that things can be changed in order to make things more simplified, especially for me as like a financial aid person. It's like I know what a burden the FAFSA can be for students, but not knowing that the examples from Cradle-to-Career would be kind of focused around the California Colleges.edu, I was thinking about it while reading it more broadly with Cradle-to-Career, especially as like a data provider. I was thinking more about what role Cradle-to-Career will have in terms of building data connections across agencies without necessarily having to have every agency create like a data sharing agreement with each other. Like, to what extent is Cradle-to-Career going to be able to remove a lot of these barriers by putting the burden onto the state? So like by allowing the silo data to connect to each other on the back end, like what sort of things can we do proactively with the data to make sure it is actionable rather than it just being basically a resource for researchers? Like what sort of things can we do in order to make sure that the data is flowing between data providers better than ever before? And I guess I'm not sure what the vision is for that going forward. Yes, that's my main comment.
Thank you, Jessica. And I think we're going to work through that together here. We're going to go ahead and turn it over to Robert for a final comment on this agenda item before we move on. Robert?
Thank you so much. I want to thank all the presenters again, both our professors as well as practitioners and students in particular for their testimonials, helping us set this in context. I certainly view this as part of the ongoing strategic planning work, which we'll discuss later today. The piece around managing our board and developing our board culture, this helps us create a foundation for the work that we're going to continue to do together moving forward. I have one question for our professors, and in particular, when we think about the three kinds of costs that these burdens impose, the learning costs, the psychological costs, and the compliance costs. Naturally, it depends on the context and the issue, but as a general proposition, which of those costs tend to tend to be the most critical or the most important. When we have to prioritize areas for improvement, where should we direct our attention as we think about a framework for how we approach problem solving?
I mean, I think you're right that it can vary, but on average, I do think it's really about the compliance costs. If you kind of look across the overall body of evidence, typically that's where you're going to get the most. When you reduce those, you're going to get the largest decrease or increase in take up, for example, and other kind of benefits you want to see. And it also does really, I think that's the area too that does oftentimes most directly impact psychological costs, right? Like it's, partly what happens is people spend enormous amounts of time, feel like they're going in circles, and that can create like a lot of the stress and frustration. So I think on average, it's going to be making the processes simpler and more accessible in that way.
Yeah, there are some policy areas where people are simply not aware of certain types of programs they might be available for. I think that is less the case in education, where there's a lot of information out there. It's more, getting people to complete the process once they are aware and find that it's available to them.
All right, so I do really want to wrap up this agenda item, but I do see that Sylvia has hopefully one quick comment for us.
I just wanted to thank the professors for really helping to frame what was a robust conversation, and perhaps not for this purpose given the time constraints, but I'm very interested in one of the slides where you outlined as possible solutions this notion of user-centered design principles. And I think as the Cradle-to-Career group continues to develop its own vision and its own strategic plan, it would be very helpful to have those guiding principles to help inform and bring light to how we approach the work that we are embarked on. So thank you so much for a really enlightening conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. And we really loved hearing the examples from you guys and really loved hearing what the students had to say. They were both really happy to participate. Thank you.
All right, so just once again, I just want to extend our thanks to all of the presenters here today for creating that really full, vibrant picture for us of both the challenges and the opportunity for us to do some really good work in this area. And while we're at it, with Robert being the last speaker to present here, I just do want to make one additional plug for that chair-elect role on the board. You'll get a wonderful opportunity to work with Robert as chair coming up here in this next fiscal year. So just make sure you think about that. All right, so our next agenda item is item 6, update from the Community Engagement Advisory Board meeting. And I would like to invite Data and Tools Advisory Board member Tamika Connor to present. Tamika?
Good morning, governing board members. I am Tamika Connor. I'm the Senior Vice President of Strategic Initiatives at Calbright College and a core team member of the California Community College's Chancellor's Office Strategic Enrollment Management Community of Practice core team. And also I serve on the advisory board for the Data and Tools Advisory Board. Today, I will provide an overview of the Community Engagement Advisory Board meeting that took place on Tuesday, March 28th of 2023. The Advisory Board received updates regarding the analytical data set, teacher training and retention dashboard, and practical tools for students. Additionally, information was provided related to press and community events, hiring, and the budget. The office provided procedural details on how the advisory board can make recommendations to the governing board given the changes made to the governing manual in February of 2023. The advisory board also received a presentation on planned outreach and communication related to californiacolleges.edu. A great discussion ensured about innovative strategies for outreach related to californiacolleges.edu, and members provided a wealth of information. Also, there was a great strategic thinking session related to how Cradle-to-Career can ensure there is awareness of existing practical tools to ensure students will benefit from them. There was also a productive discussion related to supports, trainings, and outreach strategies that will be launched with the release of Cradle-to-Career dashboards. Members provided great thoughts and insights related to tailored outreach ideas. Overall, it was a very productive meeting, and the members' discussions were very rich. The next Community Engagement Advisory Board will take place virtually on Tuesday, June 6th. I appreciate your time and will now pass it back to our chair, Amy Fong.
Thank you, Tamika, for your report. So we're actually going to hear again from you on the Data and Tools Advisory Board meeting. So again, let's go ahead and hold questions until Tamika's completed her updates on both items.
Thank you. Good morning again. I will now provide an overview of the Data and Tools Advisory Board meeting that took place on Thursday, March 30th of 2023. The Data and Tools Advisory Board received the same updates related to the office and progress regarding data and tools projects, as well as procedural updates made to the governing manual that will affect the advisory board. The advisory board also engaged in a discussion about teacher training and retention dashboard. Members reflected on students and teacher preparation programs and what disciplines they pursue for their community college awards. The advisory board engaged in the advisory board engaged the office in a conversation about nuanced ways to analyze how students earn teacher credentials, which is crucial in promoting equity in teacher pipelines. Additionally, the advisory board offered valuable input on the types of teacher training programs available to students. Ideas promoted from these discussions will be used to finalize the dashboard design brief to begin building the prototypes. Overall, it was a very productive meeting, and the members' discussions were very thoughtful. The next Data and Tools Advisory Board will be coupled with the Community Engagement Advisory Board, which will take place virtually on Tuesday, June 6th. This concludes my second update and my time here with you today. I will now turn it back over to our chair, Amy Fong. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your taking the time to be with us here today, Tamika. So thanks for both of those updates that you provided for our governing board. Are there any questions for Tamika from our board members? All right, seeing none, just a quick agenda check. We'll plan on doing a break after item 9 on strategic planning. So let's go ahead and move on to item 8 for now. Update on the Data and Tools and Engagement, and Community Engagement Advisory Board's applications, rubrics, and selection process, that item. I'd like to go ahead and invite governing board member and member of the ad hoc committee for the selection of advisory boards, Marisol Avinia, to present this item.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, board members. Today, I will provide an update on the ad hoc committee for the selection of advisory boards. But before I start, I want to take this opportunity to appreciate the members of the committee, Gavin, who is our chair, Sylvia, Thomas, and Debbie. So as a reminder, both the data and tools and the community engagement advisory boards seat 16 members whose initial appointment terms are staggered, such that 1/3 of the positions will expire each year. It is the charge of the committee to develop a slate of candidates to fill vacancies on each of the advisory boards. So the committee met on Thursday, April 20th, to review the applications, rubrics, selection processes, and outreach plan for the data and tools and community engagement advisory boards. As I mentioned, in August, both advisory boards will face vacancies. The Data and Tools Advisory Board will have 5 members departing, and the Community Engagement Advisory Board will have 6 members cycling off, as shown on the slide. As the committee was analyzing the upcoming vacancies, an important item to note was that there is a need for student representation on both advisory boards, as well as the perspective from community colleges on the Data and Tools Advisory Board. This was important framing to ground the conversation about outreach. Next slide. As a committee, we reviewed both applications and rubrics, provided feedback, and determined that it would be best to have 2 verifiers work with the Cradle-to-Career staff offline to make all necessary amendments to the recruitment package. I am pleased to announce that the applications went live on Monday, May 1st. The office made a new page on the C2C website that is dedicated to the application process. And as shown on this, it's shown on this slide. This will provide applicants with a static landing area to access key information related to the application process. Next slide. In an effort to raise awareness of the application, the office social media platforms circulated a flyer with stakeholders, campus centers, and student ambassadors. Next slide. Additionally, the office has collected testimonials from current members, which are showcased on the C2C's website. We ask that members show their support by assisting in the dissemination of the materials in order to have a healthy pool of applications for our advisory boards. If any of you would like to receive the application information again, please make sure you contact Mary Kate. Please note that the applications will close on Wednesday, May 24th, which is just 2 weeks from today. The ad hoc committee will meet again on Tuesday, June 23rd to review the slate of candidates. Thank you so much for the opportunity to provide this update. This concludes my presentation, and I will now pass it over to Chair Fong.
Thank you so much, Marisol, for that detailed update. We'd love for our members to go ahead and share this information out to their networks. You know, that's a really great way to recruit the best of the best. The deadline for applications, once again, is May 24th, 2 weeks from today. So help us get the word out. Are there any questions from our board members for Marisol? All right, seeing none, the next agenda item is item 9, an update from the Strategic Plan Ad Hoc Committee. As you'll recall, this ad hoc committee was impaneled at our last board meeting to bridge between the Cradle-to-Career high-level vision and mission and to our work plan as we move forward together in building this data system. And what I've seen in other projects, and I'm sure what our governing board members, we all have sort of similar experiences, that it's really important to be just crystal clear about what our objectives are and to be able to set that context for what it means to achieve success at the outset. So we need to define those up front, not at the end, so that we can evaluate our progress together. As our work centers around, data, I think it's really important that we lean into that piece and, evaluate that as part of our assessment of our objectives and metrics, evaluate data about our progress. So I would like to invite incoming board chair and chair of the Strategic Plan Ad Hoc Committee, Robert Takora, to present.
Thank you, Chair Fong. Good morning once again. This is going to be a brief interim update on the work of the Ad Hoc Committee, which has just begun recently. As a reminder, this committee was put in place to meet the requirement of Education Code 10866D, which directs us to adopt an annual strategic plan and review and revise that plan as needed. So since our February 8th governing board meeting, the committee has met twice, once in April and again in early May. And I'm happy to provide some additional insight about those meetings right now. So the first meeting, the committee took time to discuss an approach and a framework for strategic planning shared with us by our partner LRI. Next slide, please. This slide organizes and defines that approach, a 6 rings approach. We're lucky that we're not having to start from scratch. So C2C's vision, mission, and legislative requirements are already in place and anchor our planning. That's the blue here that represents that work that's already completed. So the committee's focus is really on the green parts, the goals and objectives for C2C in the next few years. Thereafter, it goes to the office to decide the action plans that are needed to meet those goals and objectives as shown in orange. Next slide. So the 4 goal areas might be familiar. They're drawn from the timeline created last year. Those nicely identify the main work streams: strategy and operations, analytical data, engagement, and practical tools. In our first meeting, the ad hoc committee took a step back and asked, what problem are we trying to solve in each of these areas? Getting clear about that naturally led to the conversation about the main goal for each area and what that could look like. Then with the goal areas drafted, the committee is now focused on objectives, short-term quantifiable results that will show progress over time. Then once finalized, the committee will share them with the governing board with a recommendation that they be considered for adoption at the August board meeting. That gives us a sense of what the timeline is going to look like, going back from February through to our next board meeting, which will take place in August. At this time, let me turn over back now to Chair Fong to see if there are any questions or comments from board members.
Thank you, Robert. Really appreciate that. We have this sort of through line from the work group planning in that blue area into what we're doing now, especially with the work plan, to really focus in on measurable objectives, those SMART goals that everyone likes to talk about, right? Make sure they're achievable, measurable, all those good things. Before we get a break, do any of our board members have questions for Robert? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so let's go ahead and head into break. It's 10:17 now. We'll come back at 10:27. I'm sorry, 11:27. All right, I see that it is 11:27. The conclusion of our 10-minute break. I'll just pause a few moments while folks get back to their desks and unmute what's the right word? Turn their cameras back on. Give it just another minute, I think. I see still some of our governing board members might not be back just yet. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome back. We are around, gosh, is it like 18 months or so into establishing the governing board, our advisory boards in the office. A lot of work has been done in that time. Marianne continues to gain ground on staffing and building capacity. You know, in prior meetings, we've heard from her and her directors on the important work of engaging stakeholders and the public, building that public trust, you know, and encouraging the transparency and that interaction, and just really the groundbreaking work of the data system. But at the end of the day, we are all here to make that data system a reality. So I, like some of our system builders here in this room, with this virtual room, you know, we are really interested in standing up the data system. So today I'm really excited to have Dan Lamore, our Director of Data Infrastructure for Cradle-to-Career. He's going to give us an update on really the nuts and bolts, as it were, of the implementation of the data system. Dan?
Thank you, Amy. As Amy mentioned, my name is Dan Lamoury. I am the Director of Data Infrastructure here at C2C. I've been in education for over 15 years as both a researcher and technologist. Recently, I worked on the CalPass Plus data system, designing, developing, deploying, managing, and maintaining what was the state's largest longitudinal education data system that incorporated K-12, higher ed, and wage data to generate dashboards and do cohort analysis for research. This breadth and depth of experience allowed me to complete the project approval lifecycle for C2C in under a year. For those unfamiliar with the PAL process, it's an exhaustive and arduous undertaking required by the state to ensure the success of the project, which usually takes years and large teams. During the PAL process, I identified the needs of the data system, what technologies would fit those needs, and what security measures must be implemented to achieve success. I'd like to focus the next portion on the technology, data, and security. So functionally, at a high level, the data system must be able to securely ingest millions of records that already exist within the source systems of our data providers. Then to be able to link all of the records into a unified data set known as the P20W dataset. To achieve this, I identified specific technology components to deliver a modern cloud-first data system. Specifically, these components are cloud hosting platform, data warehousing, master data management, and data visualization. Ultimately, the goal is to build a data system that incorporates the following pillars of excellence: operational, secure, reliable, performance, and cost-effective. By operational, I mean the management and monitoring of the system, automated deployments, event management, continually improving on the processes and procedures. Security refers to the protecting of the confidentiality and integrity of the data, creating security controls to prevent access, and utilizing a zero trust framework. Reliable means that the data system can consistently perform the required functions despite load or external impacts, which is to say availability, scalability, and the ability to recover quickly. Performance includes things like selecting the appropriate resources for workloads, optimizing performance of said workloads and associated resources, while also monitoring this performance over time. Cost-effective is straightforward. It means avoiding unnecessary costs by right-sizing the resources for the data system. So, back one, please. So to fit the needs of the data system, I used and address the aforementioned pillars, I used a best of breed approach to internally procure industry-leading and innovative technologies. In doing so, I chose the following core solutions: Amazon Web Services, Snowflake, Tamer, and Power BI. These vendors have a proven track record of demonstrating excellence in their respective fields and are used in a wide range of applications. Moreover, I'm excited to partner with Tamer for their master data management solution, which comes with their innovative identity resolution toolset. It uses a probabilistic machine learning approach to identity resolution instead of an outdated deterministic approach. This means we will achieve a higher level of confidence in our record linking, both within and between our educational segments. Lastly, Tamer is used by other government entities around the country for master data management and identity resolution. And I swear I am not on the Tamer payroll. But having struggled with identity resolution in previous work, I'm especially excited about Tamer. So in sum, these vendors will allow us as C2C to securely transmit, store, master, link, and display the ingested data. So helping guide this process is our new principal data architect, Muni Chitnani. She joined the team on February 28th and brings decades of technology experience, both in terms of breadth and depth. And I'd like to take this opportunity to allow Muni to introduce herself.
Thank you, Dan. Good morning, everyone. I'm Muni Chitnani, and I want to give a little background about myself. My recent position was an IT manager at the California Workforce Development Board. I'm very familiar with the C2C project and the initiatives of the C2C project, and which is under the labor agency. During my career at state, I worked at the Department of State Hospitals, Department of Healthcare Services and Employment Development Department, and CWDB, which is the California Workforce Development Board, in various capacities, including as an IT manager, project manager, technical lead, solution architect, data architect, and a full stack application developer. Some of the initiatives I led, like for the state, are the large mission critical projects, including the Short-Haul Medical Project for behavioral health for healthcare services, benefit system modernization at EDD, and the CalSkills program at the board, CWDB, which is the California Workforce Development Board. With that, I'll turn it back to Dan.
Thanks, Mani. Now, next slide, please. Okay, moving on to data. So given the high-level understanding of the technologies involved in the data system, the next step is the identification of the specific data elements coming from the originating source systems maintained by our data providers that satisfy the data points identified in the participation agreement. Because all the data elements are stored in disparate source systems, the challenge is to build a data model that allows each provider to submit the necessary information, but in a manner that is easily managed and doesn't require undue burden on our data providers. To achieve this goal of data collection for data providers, C2C has worked extensively over the last 6 months to understand the source systems and their data structures. This collaborative effort has yielded file specification artifacts that are specific to each data provider, but have a high degree of uniformity across the data elements. Additionally, these artifacts govern how the data are structured, both in terms of the physical files being submitted and the data contained therein. For example, C2C is requiring the ubiquitous RFC 4180 specification, which outlines how records and fields are delimited within a file. This is commonly known as the CSV file, or comma-separated file. The slide shows a screenshot of the first page of a file specification document as an example. And also, I'd like to thank UC in particular for collaborating on the file specification process and co-creating a template that we used with the 10 data providers who will initially share data. Now, that said, creating the file specification documents was not without its challenges. As an example that helps illustrate the challenge of aligning data elements is the race ethnicity data element. So how exactly do we capture this element? What are the code values? Do we align to a state standard? Do we align to a federal standard? In this particular case, we collectively agreed to align to the federal standard as defined in the Integrated Post-Secondary Education Data System, or IPEDS for short. However, this requires a non-zero number of data providers to derive this element based on the combination of data elements internal to their source systems, as these data are not stored exactly as they are defined in IPEDS. Another example is student major. The data are captured differently between our higher education data providers. The California Community Colleges stores this element as what is known as the Taxonomy of Programs Code, or TOP code, while CSU and UC store this element as a Classification of Instructional Programs Code, or CIP code. So our higher ed partners have been meeting with C2C as a group bi-weekly to iron out data alignment questions. And this work is critical to ensure that C2C will have alignment between the data elements submitted by data providers. Next slide, please. Okay, moving on to security. Our Security Policies Task Force began routinely meeting bi-weekly starting October 24th, 2022. The meetings are facilitated by WestEd, and the membership of this group is composed of information security stakeholders from C2C and the data providers. The goal of the Security Policies Task Force is to serve as a resource and a structure for validating that the security and privacy requirements have been met for the data system throughout the lifecycle of the project. Members validate project compliance with state and federal standards, provide advice on information security issues, and make recommendations affecting the security of the data system. And lastly, review specific deliverables. Of those deliverables, the privacy threshold assessment and privacy impact assessment has been reviewed, and the task force is very close to nearing a final artifact. The artifact assesses the impact of individual privacy of state information assets and record systems that collect or maintain personal information, and for identifying the strategies to mitigate such an impact. The artifact incorporates specific privacy protections into the development and management of the data system. The next major deliverable is the System Security Plan, or SSP for short. This artifact provides an overview of the security requirements for an information system and describes the security controls in place or planned to meet those requirements. In particular, the SSP describes the system boundary, the environment in which the system operates, how security requirements are implemented, and the relationship with or connections to other systems. Leading the effort on all things security is Mike Araki, who joined C2C on April 14th as our Chief Information Security Officer. Mike, if you'd like to take this opportunity to introduce yourself, please.
Hello, everyone. Pleasure to see you today. I've been in state civil service since 1991 with occasional brief breaks. I retired once after serving on the fiscal project for 5 years and retired again after 5 years at the Department of General Services, where I was their CISO. I have an undying passion for cybersecurity and look forward to ensuring a safe cyberspace for C2C and all its stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. That's all for technology, data, and security. Thank you, and back to you, Amy.
Thank you. Welcome to me and to Mike, and thank you, Dan, for giving the board, greater insight into the technical aspects of the system and, gosh, all the progress, of you and your team. There's a lot to digest, and we look forward to hearing more in the future as we learn more about how the data system is being developed. This is great contextual information, so it is helpful in keeping us grounded in the reality of standing up a data system. So we'll be sure to bring you back so we can learn more in the future at future board meetings. We do have an item at the end of the agenda today where we'll ask for those future board meeting agenda items. So that said, do we have any high-level questions from our board members for Dan? Chris.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you very much for that presentation, Dan. Really appreciate the work that you've led over the past several months. And a shout out to Ryan as well from the office for taking the leadership in convening the meetings, both the one-on-one meetings between data providers in the office, but also the leadership on the part of Ryan and Dan in coordinating the meeting with multiple data providers so we can have an open conversation and get each other's feedback and perspectives on how our respective data systems map to all the technology and the infrastructure that Dan walked us through there. So I think we made a lot of progress, and I especially appreciate the connections we made across data providers and working through all these problems and achieving solutions, and look forward to continuing to move this core part of Cradle-to-Career forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the next agenda item, and that is item 11, new data points for the teacher training and retention dashboard. As you'll recall, the teacher training and retention dashboard is our first major work product in the work plan. The board approved the work plan timeline, and this work is scheduled to be completed this year. So I would like to invite Ryan Estrada to present this item.
Thank you, Chair Fong, and hi to everybody, members of the governing board and also the public. Nice to see everybody again. My name is Ryan Estrada, and I'm the Director of Data Programs at the Office of Cradle-to-Career Data, and I oversee the user-centered design of the data tools that we're building on top of the P20W data set, and also the overall experience of those analytic tools and also the operational tools. And the purpose of my section is to share about the teacher training and retention dashboard and also the data points needed to build it. And in a moment, we'll share data points for you to consider. But first, I'm going to stay on this slide for a little bit for a recap of the key moments that have led us to this point. Going to start in December of 2020 when our data partners, CDE, CSU, and CTC, it's the commission, proposed the teacher training and retention dashboard as a way to show what's possible with a P20W data set and what was then the proposed infrastructure for that data set. A few months later, in early 2021, the discussion progressed. Our partners identified possible research questions, data definitions, and security requirements for the dashboard. In February of 2022, you, the C2C governing board, reviewed a proposal to expand the scope of the teacher training and retention dashboard to include employment data. And this broadened what's possible to learn from this dashboard. So issues like how long it takes a teacher to earn a living wage on average, and also what industries teachers work in throughout their careers could be explored. In summer of 2022, the office convened a task force to refine the research questions and data points in this expanded scope. On the task force were partner representatives and advisors, and they learned that data points in the participation agreement could be used to build a teacher training and retention dashboard, but only if combined with additional data points not previously identified in the 18-month planning process. And these data points, like whether a student was enrolled in a teacher training program and whether the earned a teaching credential, would be necessary for the work at hand. In December of last year, an ad hoc committee designed and proposed a procedure for adding additional data points, which the board approved in February. And this procedure made it possible for our data partners to work with us on the details of each data point in preparation for today's meeting. Next slide, please. Since that time, we've received more input on what research questions and topics to prioritize. This slide highlights just a few of the questions the dashboard can explore with the additional data points that you'll be considering today. And it's important to note that these topics were informed not only by the 18-month planning process, but also the user-centered design project that we launched in January of this year. And it connects to a larger conversation about the need for teachers across the state, particularly as we transition from the pandemic. Research projects like the California Teacher Education and Improvement Network, or CTERN, at the University of California Office of the President, and others have produced work in this area. And we aim to build a dashboard that empowers the public to explore and participate in that conversation. Next slide, please. Now we're going to zoom in one level to look at example questions the teacher training and retention dashboard can answer. The task force has proposed several important research questions, and this slide has a few about the teacher pipeline, just as an example. The interest in this topic might be captured best by a quote from an interviewee that we spoke with during our user-centered design process. And that interviewee said, quote, "We put a lot of money into different kinds of fellowship programs for teachers and loan forgiveness programs and stipends and residencies, but they simply can't afford this anymore. You've got too much in student loans, and you just wonder how anybody on a teacher's salary is ever going to be able to make that up. I think this is one of those factors that could be contributing to attrition," end quote. And I think this quote symbolizes the kinds of insights we're identifying as we talk with the community, which brings us to the final update before I propose the new data points, and that is an update about our user-centered design work. We started this phase of user-centered design work in January of this year, partnering with WestEd. And this work builds on the user-centered design work developed in the 18-month planning process. The goal of this work is to uncover the kinds of experiences that will make our data tools meaningful for the public. If working on the data system is like building a reliable car engine, then the user-centered design project is like creating a meaningful driving experience. It's what informs the services our dashboards, query builder, and research request tools will provide to the public, as well as the look, feel, and experience of using them. To start this work, we partnered with WestEd to explore and expand the user personas developed in the 18-month planning process. And the result of that is a brief that will be the foundation for designers to help us build our data tools, which brings us to an exciting announcement. The office has entered into a contract with Designers Chapter 3 to help us build a meaningful user experience and user interface for our data tools. Chapter 3's portfolio includes the United Nations Human Development Reports Office, the City of San Francisco, the UC Riverside Library, and many others. And we're very excited to take all we've learned from the public about what this dashboard needs to be and to begin building. Okay, so all of that was context for the main purpose of this agenda item. Here's where we've been so far, and now we'll be proposing data points needed to build a teacher training and retention dashboard. Next slide, please. Okay, as discussed in past meetings, there's a shared understanding that we would need more data points for the teacher training and retention dashboard than were on the original P20W data point list. And today we're proposing 20 data points that CTC and CSU have selected, and you'll find these detailed in the staff memo that you received before this meeting. Before I turn it over to Chair Fong, a quick message from me. I get the privilege of sharing this with you, but the truth is it takes a lot of hard work from our partners to get this done. And when we're linking data across systems, every data point has the potential to need complex conversations and decisions. It takes a lot of collaboration, takes a lot of time. And today, 2 data partners are collectively proposing 20 such data points. So a very big thank you to all involved, and especially to our data partners, not only on the P20W data points we've been working on so far, but also these additional 20. Okay, so with that, I'll turn it over to Chair Fong for the next step.
Thank you, Ryan. Great to hear that we are leveling up the user-centered design piece with the addition of chapter 3. And, that was just really great information. And, once again, thank you for your and Dan's leadership in working with our data partners and really building those relationships that will help move us forward. I think overall, this is a great example of our governance structure working. We identified a need, the ad hoc committee defined a process, and we approved it in February as a governing board. There's a lot of hard work, as Ryan has recapped for us, and now we have this first opportunity to implement it. So I would like to now open it up for board member discussion. Do we have any questions or comments for Ryan? Tom.
Yeah, thanks, Amy, and thank you, Ryan, and thanks to the CSU and the CTC for working on this as well. I know AICCU member institutions, the nonprofits, won't be supplying their own information into the data system for another year or so, as the system continues to be built out. But, we do look forward to contributing our information, particularly around this issue of the teacher pipeline. Incredibly important, issue for the state and for our students, K-12, and definitely, as they matriculate up into higher education as well. Something like almost 50% of the teaching credentials are, or new teachers are educated and graduated by the nonprofit colleges and universities in the state. So we do have a large stake in this, and we're looking forward to contributing that data once our folks are pulled into the system.
That's really great to hear. Thank you, Tom. Next up is Marisol.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this great presentation, Ryan, and for all the great work that's been happening and that we don't see. So it's just great to see the update. My question is twofold. One is, I'm assuming this is not the end all be all, right? Like that there may be additional data points that will be coming into the teacher dashboard, and particularly I'm interested in assignment data, right? Because as I'm looking at some of the topic areas in our agenda item, some of these questions, research questions, will need some of that assignments, both subject matter and sites, school sites, etc. On teachers. So just wondering if that's a conversation underway, and what we might expect to see in the future as it pertains to the further developing out the teacher dashboard.
Thank you, Marisol. So we do have a process for additional data points, as I mentioned. So that's the really wonderful piece of how all of this works, is that we have, sort of the steps in how to do that, conversations around, how is it possible, engaging with all of our different providers. I'm actually going to ask Marianne, how far along in our overall work plan are those types of data points?
So to the specific question that she was raising, CDE and Cradle-to-Career continue to have ongoing meetings about this project and the data points that would be needed for the teacher dashboard. So those conversations are ongoing. And then to your point, there are, in February, you as a board approved processes for additional data points that apply both to this dashboard and more broadly Today is an example of data providers bringing forward specific data points, and then there are also the mechanisms for advisory boards to provide recommendations to the board as well.
Thank you. Next up is Gavin.
So thank you. I just wanted to sort of take a moment and celebrate too. This is this is what we're about. This is what we're doing. Especially this project as proposed, and awaiting further data points coming in as well. The process that we undertook to really sort of dig into how and when and where we were going to add data points and this kind of stuff. The stuff that I think got a lot of us into this work. I just wanted to take a moment with a personal privilege and celebrate that, and celebrate the fact that we'll be getting more in and getting more done soon.
Yes, we should all celebrate that. Thank you, Gavin. Chris.
Thank you, Amy. And I second Gavin's celebration of this great work. And I really look forward to all the great information that's going to come out of this, and look forward to learning how the user-centered design process unfolds. I just wanted to also, link this back to the previous presentation from Dan on the P20 data set, and how it's not just these additional 20 data points from CSU and CTC that are going to contribute to this teacher pipeline dashboard, that the P20W core data set is also going to illuminate parts of the teacher pipeline for all contributors who are part of that pipeline into the Cradle-to-Career data system. So although UC is not in a position to contribute these additional granular teacher pipeline data elements, we look forward to being part of this dashboard through the P20 data set that we'll be contributing, and look forward to really broadening this work and moving it forward. So thank you all very much for this great work.
Thank you, Chris. Next up is Sylvia.
Thank you. I also want to echo the enthusiasm that I share in reaching this important milestone. I also would like for us to hold each other accountable and ask for greater specificity and clarity about when our UC partners and our independent colleges and universities will be, in fact, contributing to this database, as well as the labor piece that is still not stood up at this phase of the process. I fully recognize that we have to iterate, we have to move, and it's an ongoing process of improvement. But I also want to make sure that the record reflects that this is an incomplete picture of teacher workforce production in California. And we are proud to be among, if not the largest contributor to teachers in California, but we are not alone in this responsibility, and really want to make sure that our partners are prepared and being prepared to line up to really bring this dashboard to its full development. I think the other thing that I want to add is really reflecting on a comment that Jessica Maldoff made earlier when she talked about our siloed approach, and is there a role for the state in moving or sharing greater responsibility for the responsibility or the burden of this data collection process. And there, I ask more specifically, are there conversations underway with the CTC to have the state play a more prominent role in ensuring that this data is collected in a consistent and timely way, so that the continued development of this and other dashboards are accelerated, because we've gone through that data collection, data definition process that was alluded to earlier. So thank you for allowing me to comment and rejoicing with all of us in this important milestone. So thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. This is an important question from the public, from all of our stakeholders, in how we can ensure that we have that pipeline for teachers, that are so critical to the success of our students and the classrooms and future outcomes. And so I appreciate the call to action for all of our board members to work collectively towards our entire goal, for our group goal here, right? And standing up this data system in order to provide these services, this information to all of our Californian stakeholders. It's one of those things that I think is going to take some time, and I really appreciate the work that the office has been doing in the background to help, put those connections, those relationships in place that are going to allow us to have these conversations, really detailed, thoughtful conversations about how to bring the different pieces of data together in a way that will really benefit all of us. All righty. So I think we're at a point where now I can ask for a motion to approve the new data points as submitted. Do I have a motion?
I'd like to move to approve the new data points as submitted.
All right, so we have a first from Sylvia. Do I have a second?
Second.
I'll second, Amy.
Yikes.
Oh, Meredith, go for it.
Thank you, Meredith. Meredith with a second. So before we take a roll call vote, I'd like to go ahead and invite public comment. Mary Kate, would you moderate public comment for us?
Yes. Okay, we will open it up for public comment. I see folks have already started to raise their hand, but just as background information for anybody who's new to join us, you just need to use that raise hand button that's at the bottom of your screen. We will ask that you keep your comments to under 2 minutes. I will be putting on the timer. I will also unmute you to speak yourself. And then just please note that while C2C promotes communication and transparency, as noted on this slide, board members and staff are not required to respond to public comment and may not discuss or act on any matter raised during public comment period that is not included on the agenda, except to place the matter on a future agenda. There we have it. I see one hand, that's from Raquel. So Raquel, I'm gonna unmute you in a moment here. Get my timer up. One moment, please. Okay.
Can you hear me?
We can. Perfect.
Hi, good afternoon. Raquel Morales on behalf of the Education Trust West. Research shows that teachers are the single most impactful in-school factor associated with student outcomes and success. Yet California has a long way to go to ensure that we design and sustain an educator pipeline that produces diverse and effective educators and addresses the teacher shortage that presently disproportionately impacts students of color and students from low-income households. We appreciate the overview of the data points planned for the inclusion of the teacher dashboard and are especially encouraged to note the addition of data from CTC on race and ethnicity of teachers to the list of data points. A constantly growing body of evidence shows that when teachers reflect the diversity of their students thrive both academically and social-emotionally. These data will be critical to understanding the work that remains for the state and districts to ensure our teacher workforce reflects the diversity of the state's students. We do, however, want to note that gaps remain in terms of the data needed to allow for a full and actionable picture of teacher data at each segment of the educator pipeline. That picture must start with preparation, capture credentialing and placement, and continue through retention. Information on the placement of teachers is where we see one of the most clear and urgent gaps to be addressed. We believe it will be key to include data on educators' site assignment in the dashboards. The data needed to tell part of the story exists in the form of the teacher assignment monitoring outcomes data set housed at the CDE. Additional information about educator demographics and years of experience, which CDE previously published on an annual basis, but which have not been made publicly available since 2018-2019, should also be brought up to date and included in the dashboard as well. Finally, we urge the agencies to commit to collecting data on the language spoken by students and teachers so we can understand the degree to which we have educators who speak the home languages of students. We appreciate the thoughtful process the C2C advisory boards and governing board have undertaken to prepare the creation of these dashboards and call upon the data advisory board in particular to add the data points we've discussed so that the dashboards provide a rich picture of the educator pipeline. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more hand raised, and that's Liz. So Liz, let me unmute you. Apologies, having some issues unmuting you, Liz. Liz, are you seeing a prompt on your end? I'm allowing it.
Sorry, I didn't see the prompt.
Okay, perfect.
I was paying attention to my notes. Duh.
That's okay. We're working through this together.
Thank you. I'm Liz Guillen of Council with Public Advocates. Good afternoon, board. I'll reinforce the eloquent comments from Ms. Morales at Education Trust West, including the great appreciation for Mr. Estrellado's proposal. And of course, adding the race and ethnicity of teachers, that is so important. School can be a much more positive experience when students see themselves in their teachers. Public Advocates is concerned, though, that in the types of credential data to be collected, there's no reference to emergency or waivers, credential types that are unfortunately present at higher rates in schools with low-income students of color. I'm really encouraged to hear the openness to more information being added to these data to get at some of the thorniest problems of our persistent shortage of teachers. Where teachers are assigned according to their credentials is critical to understanding the correct responses for improvement, both at the local level and state level. Which schools, and therefore which communities, have the highest needs for fully prepared and properly assigned teachers? To what extent do fully credentialed teachers stay or not, compared to other lesser prepared teachers? Another data point, by connecting K-12 student course taking data to the higher ed teacher candidate data, can help us understand is which high schools and high school pathway programs are effective in grooming future teachers. This gets at the pipeline and has the potential to increase diversity in the teacher workforce as well. We know these data live at the Department of Ed, not at CTC or CSU. It's helpful to know that you're continuing to explore data with CDE. We understand the capacity issues facing CDE and will be supporting the budget requests for increasing their capacity to provide the data it collects. All this to say, we urge your support for including the best data needed to once and for all tackle our teacher shortage problem. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
All right, we have a motion to approve the new data points as presented that was forwarded by Sylvia and seconded by Meredith. At this time, I'd like to remind members that members may vote yes, yes with reservations, no, and abstain. And for those voting yes with reservations and no, we'll circle back after the roll call vote to ensure we capture your comment for the meeting minutes. Mary Kate, please call roll.
Amy.
Yes.
Robert.
Yes.
Londe.
Yes.
Sylvia.
Yes.
Marisol.
Yes.
Debbie.
Yes.
David.
Yes.
Sean.
Sean may have stepped away.
Chris.
Yes.
John Hetz.
Yes.
Jackie Irwin. Okay, Sujin.
Yes.
Michelle, alternate for John Laird.
Yes.
Meredith.
Yes.
Jessica.
Yes.
John Ohanian.
Yes.
Gavin.
That's really bad angle. Yeah, buddy.
Keep going. Javier.
Yes.
Tom.
Yes.
Jerry.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Can we go back and check with Cassandra?
Perfect. Cassandra, alternate for Jackie Irwin. Okay, they may still be absent. And then also absent, I have Gavin and Catalina.
Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3. 3 absent votes, 17 yes votes. Motion passes. Thank you all. Take a breath. Now we'll move on to agenda item 12, presentation on Cradle-to-Career Communications Plan. And I'd like to invite Shannon Sparrow from the office to present.
Good afternoon, governing board members. We've officially made it past 12, so it is my pleasure to talk to you today about updates here at Cradle-to-Career about our ongoing communications projects and efforts as Director of Cradle-to-Career Engagement. So a through line of today's conversations that you may have picked up on is that we are actually building a state entity from the ground up, which I think is a big reason why many of us are all here. This is a very exciting time, and we have the opportunity to shape a data system that will impact millions of Californians. So the building blocks that we're putting into place now are truly the foundation on which C2C will be built. We are mandated in statute to prioritize community engagement during the creation of the data system, but we view our work and efforts as so much more than that. We have a duty to serve Californians to the best of our abilities. And I believe that we can achieve this by ensuring the populations that we serve are heard, that communities have a seat at the table, and that their questions and concerns are addressed. And the communications plays a key role in this work, which I will speak to today. So on the screen are our communications goals for all of Cradle-to-Career's work, which is centered on ensuring Californians know about the data system itself, and that folks can see the purpose and utility of the system. We're also working to make sure stakeholders see themselves in the process and can take action, which we're facilitating by defining clear communications objectives, defining key target audiences, and tailoring messages to those audiences. We're also identifying and promoting opportunities for input and feedback, and we're setting target metrics for reach and usage. We work to ensure that the system is accessible to all of our users and that we're setting inclusive norms for communications. Next slide, please. So with that holistic view of our communications work, I would like to take a deeper dive into the ongoing comms projects at Cradle-to-Career. Work is always evolving here, and we've taken significant strides to solidify the Cradle-to-Career brand, which I'm going to speak to now. So as part of the user-centered design process that we've been speaking to today, we've collaborated with key stakeholders on the C2C brand. We've heard from you, the governing board, and we've talked to the C2C advisory boards, as well as members of the public, and solicited feedback both in real time during our public meetings, as well as through surveys. You provided concrete and helpful feedback and ideas, noting images and messaging and concepts that resonated with you when thinking about C2C and the mission of the data system, as well as identifying those that didn't. We are grateful for your guidance and are working with collaborative communications now to finalize our logo and preliminary branding. So in the top right-hand corner of your screen, you'll see a logo that you should be familiar with. This is the logo that most of our stakeholders identified with during the input process. And below that are iterations that incorporate feedback from collaborators, such as making the logo more dynamic and colorful, or making sure to include the final C2C name and tagline, which you can see attempted in the bottom screen. We're still missing data system, but we're going to work to get there. And you will also see that we are working to include some elements that have come to define our work here. So in this last logo, you can see some of the bar charts that kind of symbolize the data that we're working with now. We have a few more rounds to go as we iterate on design. We're streamlining colors and concepts. We're going to make this more harmonious, so you'll see new iterations soon, but we have valued your input and we are working through our preliminary design and look forward to rolling out the official brand this summer. So following that first design push, we're also in the process of a design RFO that will allow us to fully realize our vision for the C2C brand. We are seeking graphic design help as well as video production assistance. And as part of these efforts, we hope to engage a contractor who can implement the creative concept, design, layout, and production of various C2C collateral, such as informational videos, tutorials, infographics, and fact sheets, printed and digital publications, such as our annual reports and brochures, and brand identity products such as the official C2C letterhead and business cards. The designer will also create visuals for related C2C projects such as the C2C data dashboards and images for the newly revamped website, which is a nice segue into the next slide here. So a brand new, exciting, inviting website has always been a key deliverable as part of the build of the data system, because the website will be one of the main, if not only, ways users will interact and engage with our tools. The new Cradle-to-Career website should engage visitors by presenting attractive visuals, intuitive navigation, and concise messaging, while also increasing functionality and be easy to use. The design should be modern and showcase information and data relative to stakeholders, and the new site will be intuitive with mobile responsive design, flexible, visually appealing, informative. Importantly, it'll be safe and secure, accessible and ADA compliant, and able to support data dashboards and tools, including our query builders. We've taken critical steps to ensure the successful revamp of the website, which includes engaging the website firm 10up for the redesign. 10up is a respected design firm that has an extensive portfolio that includes many agencies in the state of California and has notably worked on sites for 538 and the California Department of Motor Vehicles, both Webby nominees. So we're super excited about this progress. We have officially completed contracts and entered into phase 1 of the website revamp, and which is focused on strategic planning and design. So stay tuned. There's a lot more work to come, but the goal is to relaunch the site by November. Next slide, please. So next, I'm going to give an update on communications and outreach efforts that we've reviewed in the past. But because the team has made significant progress along with our partners, I really want to make time to report on those today. So we've discussed plans for coordinated communications efforts to increase awareness and understanding of our operational tools. And as Marianne reported earlier today, we are very glad about the recent news of the completed data sharing agreement between the California Department of Education and californiacolleges.edu that will provide all California 6th through 12th grade students with free universal basic accounts. Students and educators alike will have better insights and information about college and career journeys, and we look forward to spreading that news. In addition to press releases and social media about the agreement, we are gearing up for joint communications efforts that promote our practical tools. And other efforts, as noted earlier today, applications are open for the new C2C advisory board members. So we've launched an outreach and social media campaign highlighting that. We are coordinating our efforts to target key stakeholders and community members and are engaged in staggering pushes throughout the month to make sure as many people who would be interested in serving on the community engagement and data and tools advisory boards know about the process. We've solicited feedback on how best to reach these folks, and will implement key strategies such as coordinating outreach to student centers and offices on school campuses, establishing a presence in public libraries, which we're really excited about, and engaging networks and listservs that reach key audiences. Beyond that, we'll also be executing critical pieces of our communications plan for our data dashboards that will engage users in prototype testing for our analytical tools and companion resources that I'm going to speak more to next. So, as you've heard from Ryan, we are deep into our users design process for our data dashboards. As we've engaged in the process, we've learned that there is certainly more than one way to build a dashboard, but we're proud that equity and inclusivity are centered in the build of our analytical tools. In partnership with WestEd, we've engaged in interviews and created a design brief and communication plan focused on the development and rollout of a teacher training dashboard. But the key themes, products, and supports that we've been working on are universal to all of our analytical tools and will be applied to all of our dashboards as we build out the data system. So on your screen is C2C's theory of equity for our data dashboards. The overall goal for our analytical tools, which is the data system will advance equity by making data accessible and actionable for all Californians, particularly for our marginalized communities, and facilitate data literacy across all user types by surfacing information and raising questions to address and tell a richer story about issues that impact specific communities. We heard today, we've also heard in the strategic planning process and other meetings as well, that folks really want to make sure that the data are actionable and that we work to empower users to make the data their own. So what you'll see on the following slides are the ideas and ultimately the companion products and collateral that will support the equity goals identified for our dashboards going forward. Great. So our communications goals for data dashboards are to empower users to explore data to address questions and issues that matter to them, regardless of their experience with using data. We want to create support tools for teachers, parents, advisors, and students, and facilitate data literacy to empower users to explore the data and dashboards. During the interview process for the first dashboard, respondents noted that to fully understand the data and questions made available through the dashboard, supplemental products and collateral are needed to surface the qualitative information necessary to deepen the understanding of a particular subject or issue. The community engagement plan created during the planning process also recommended that C2C staff work to embed resources along the dashboard to avoid audience melt. So to support the release of any data dashboard, we are proposing the products and collateral on the screen be embedded on the C2C site alongside the dashboard, which will include tutorials and fact sheets on how to use dashboards, interactive videos, one-pagers on key data points paired with vignettes and stories that will include easy to understand definitions and clearly defined data points, neutral guides by personas, person-centered data analysis when using the data, learning agendas or research questions, and when ready, promotion of our query builders that will allow users to really dig into the data. Next slide, please. So I've outlined the overall equity and communications goals of our data dashboards and the companion resources that we will develop to accompany the analytical tool. So this final slide details the overall goals of our work by user type or personas that will provide equitable access to information, professional development, and technical assistance for different stakeholders, and functionality that adds value to the day-to-day work of your users. Also noted in the community engagement planning document was the importance of development of communications for the different types of users that we serve. So I've translated that into ideas, into goals for dashboard users that you'll see on your screen. Occasional visitors to the data are folks who are not as experienced with data, but have a question they want to answer or are interested in a specific issue. For our occasional visitors, we want to make information easy to access, navigate, and understand. We want to leverage supplemental products to facilitate data literacy and provide professional development and technical assistance to advance occasional users to data ambassadors. We will create tutorials, fact sheets, and videos to demonstrate how to use the dashboards to facilitate the usage of these tools. Our data ambassadors or our messengers are users who are most likely to use the data system most often. This audience may not be researchers, but they will be data savvy. They will look for things like trend lines and comparison data, and we will work to enable the exploration of data and information by developing support tools for teachers, parents, advisors, and students, and promoting supplemental products. We will also clarify how information from the data system can inform local control action planning and provide guidance and resources that support sharing with communities and the users' networks. And finally, the data power users are our researchers and analysts who really want to dig into the data sets. For our power users, we will highlight person-centered data analyses and supplemental resources to inform individual analysis. We will promote data dashboards as a tool for sharing complex findings to a wide audience and promote future query builders, signaling the ability to disaggregate data and request input for in advance of our launch later this year. So with that, concludes my comms update for Cradle-to-Career. And with that, I will turn it back to Amy.
Oh my gosh, thank you, Shannon, for that presentation. You know, as noted earlier, the data system is a big lift. It's going to take work on multiple fronts. I'm really excited to hear about this comprehensive communications plan, you know, how we're leveling up in this area, as well as, you know, with some experts like, you know, from 10 Up, and how we can increase access to the important information about the data system that we're building. I was really excited to see that slide on the theory of action, you know, as it relates to our work to advance equity. So that's really great. Just lots and lots of progress being made, lots of new things that we get to look forward to. I'm really also looking forward to the new website. That intuitiveness in communications and user-centered design that you spoke about is really one of those treatments for the frustration that came about sort of came up in the conversation earlier in our meeting. So in the interest of time, I do see that you are our next presenter. So let's go ahead and hold questions for Shannon until the end of her presentation on this next segment. This next item is agenda item 13, presentation on board demographics. Shannon?
Great. Thank you so much, Amy. Next slide, please. Great. So during the November board meeting, governing board members discussed a request received by the C2C office for the demographic information of C2C's leadership. And we have worked to facilitate the collection of information that is self-reported by board members to share in aggregate on the C2C site for the purposes of transparency and equity. I'd again like to thank governing board members Elo Rivera and Vu for their feedback on this process. It has been very valuable as we try to navigate this. This year's survey only asked respondents to report on race, ethnicity, and gender, but we did ask governing board members about the potential for including future demographic questions that would better capture the lived experiences of board members and reflect the broader experience of all Californians, such as identifying as first generation or an English learner or growing up in a particular socioeconomic status. Next slide, please. Thank you to the 2/3 of the C2C governing boards who are, we appreciate your time and participation. We know that we ask many things of this board, and so we are just grateful for your help as we try to get this up and running. Though not completed yet, we will display responses for this year in aggregate shortly on our website, and you will see something along the lines of this example soon, so stay tuned for that. And with that, I appreciate the time today to speak. I'm happy to answer any questions and just are grateful for you all joining us today.
Thank you again, Shannon, for that helpful presentation. And I do have a quick note for our governing board members who have not yet completed the survey. Thank you to those who have done so. You should have received a follow-up email with a link to the survey around 11, well, shortly here.
It'll come soon. We're early.
It will come soon. The survey takes less than 2 minutes to complete. It's super simple. So please fill it out if you can. Your participation and responses will provide a holistic view of the Cradle-to-Career Governing Board. It's important for us to all sort of walk that talk and to be able to show up for each other. So do we have any questions from our members for Shannon on any of her items that she presented today? I see Sylvia has her hand up.
I don't have a question. I am just blown away and really impressed with how far this conversation has gone in the short period of time, I think, since Shannon's been hired, right? This is, to me, is so exciting to see this. And I was also very heartened to see that those user design values and principles that I alluded to earlier are here. And so I am thoroughly impressed and inspired by what I'm seeing, and just want to say, keep up the great work.
Thank you, Sylvia. I see Meredith has her hand up.
I will just add as well, Shannon, so impressive. And I know there's a whole team that enabled this work to happen, but really just a shout out to your leadership and your thoughtful and collaborative approach to be able to present all of those amazing things that you were working on in parallel with all sorts of different knobs to creatively address. Much appreciation.
Thank you, Meredith. Next up, we have Sujin.
I also wanted to just flag the incredible amount of work, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness that went to it. And just to underscore, like the setting up of comms. I mean, comms are hard and engagement's hard, but just like having to start from scratch for like a high profile entity that hasn't existed really successfully in our state in the past, and the amount of lift and thought and like just the brand, the website. I mean, thinking about the demographics of the board and responding to community feedback around this. I just want to say kudos, and I please let us know if there's more that you need around support and getting this work done, because I know how incredibly time consuming and hard it is to do, and to do thoughtfully. But I just wanted to say amazing work, and I'm excited.
Thank you, Sujin. Next up, we have Robert.
Just like to echo what all our other governing board members have said in response to Shannon's presentation, which reflects a lot of the presentations that's been presented by our directors. It's very clear that there's a lot of collaboration taking place amongst members of our office, which is a testament, obviously, to Marianne's leadership in bringing the talent together and then having them work in concert with one another. There was one particular slide here I'd like to spotlight for the governing board, which was around all the various tools that that's already been envisioned when rolling out a data dashboard, the tutorials, different ways of being able to share. I know that will come to light once it's actually out there in public, but just the level of thought around thinking about the way that the public interacts with the products that our office envisions putting out there is really fantastic and impressive, and will help us advance our equity goals and our objectives as a governing board. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. I feel like maybe it's inspiring some of us to think about our own communications and our networks, and how to get our socials kind of up and running, or level those up as well. So I'm really just heartened to hear about just all the passion that's behind the comms and behind the group work here. So thank you so much. Next slide, please.
Sorry, Amy, quick procedural question before we jump to our next agenda item. We did have a board member, we just saw a quick raised hand that had some technical difficulties during our last vote. So could we just, we'd like to amend the record.
Let's go ahead and amend the record and call on Gavin to talk.
So yeah, thank you. With permission, Madam Chair, I'd like to, apparently my enthusiastic aye vote wasn't heard on item 11. So I'd like to correct the record and make sure that I'm recorded appropriately.
Thank you, Gavin, and your vote.
Aye.
Thank you. So that will be recorded to update to 8 affirmative yes votes. While we're here, I'll go ahead and take a minute to ask if there are any other board members or alternates that would like to amend the record. We had a couple others that were not present for the vote, so maybe they've had a minute or two to come back on. If so, please do step forward.
And for clarity, that would be Sean or Jackie, Cassandra being the alternate.
And this was vote to adopt the additional data points as presented.
Correct, agenda item 11.
All right, so hearing none, I think we can proceed to public comment. Hand it over to Mary Kate. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, we are now on agenda item 14. We'll be opening it up for public comment. So if any folks in the audience would like to speak publicly about any general item, please feel free to raise your hand now. I'm not seeing any hands raised at this time. I'll just give it another moment in case. Still seeing none. We can close it. Thank you very much.
All right, next slide. Well, I'm happy to report we're just a little bit ahead of schedule. So instead of the 30-minute lunch or so that we were planning, let's go ahead and plan for a 35-minute lunch. We'll be back here at 1:06. See you soon. A little bit of background noise there. Thank you. All right, thank you, board members, for connecting back with us. I see some of you are on video. Hopefully everyone got a quick chance to refresh themselves over the lunch break. So we're going to go ahead and reconvene and resume our meeting at 1:07 here. I'd like to go ahead and ask Mary Kate to do a roll call for us so we can establish quorum.
Perfect. Amy?
Here.
Robert?
Here.
Londe? We'll circle back. Sylvia?
Here.
Marisol?
Here.
Catalina? Flagging as absent.
Here.
Catalina here.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. I will
Thank
update the record. Thank you. Debbie?
Here.
David?
Here.
Sean? I will circle back. Chris?
Here.
Thank you. John Hetz?
Here.
Jackie? Or
Here.
alternate? Oh, thank you.
I'm here.
Got it. Thank you. Appreciate it. Sujin?
Here.
Michelle Reyes for John Laird?
Here.
Meredith?
Here.
Jessica?
Here.
John Ohanian? I will circle back. Gavin?
Here.
Thank you. Javier? I will circle back. Tom?
Here.
Jerry?
Here.
Okay. Just quick circling back for any folks if they may have joined us while we were doing the roll call. Londe? Sean? John Ohanian? Okay, we do have a quorum.
Thank you. I'd like to also just quickly check for our interpreter services. Could you please let us know if you're ready to go?
The interpretation is live right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, so at this time, I'd like to go ahead and go to the next slide. I'd like to turn it over to Julia Blair before we go into closed session.
Great, thank you so much. Under California Government Code Section 11126A, the Cradle-to-Career Governing Board hereby provides public notice that it may meet in closed session regarding the appointment, employment, evaluation of performance, discipline, or dismissal of a public employee, and the report of the 22-23 Executive Director Review Ad Hoc Committee regarding the appointment, employment, evaluation of performance, discipline, or dismissal of a public employee. For the purposes of this notice, a public employee includes an individual exempt from civil service within the meaning of subdivision E of Section 4 of Article 7 of the California Constitution.
Thank you. Mary Kate, will you help us go into closed session?
Yes. So for the public, as our council just explained, our members will be logging off now from our general public room, and they will be going into closed session. We will be opening it back up in open session. I think we're thinking maybe in an hour. It could be sooner than that, but I'll be here and slides will indicate when we're back online in open session.
Governing board members, I want to flag that I cannot host 2 concurrent meetings. I've just tried, and so we're going to resend a new Zoom link to you all shortly. So stay tuned for the next 5 minutes while we work this out. Apologies, it looked like it worked during the dry run, but it's not working now. So I am going to work with Mary Kate to get the closed session up for you, and you should see a new email come through to you very shortly. So Thank you for your patience. We will work to get this up soon.
All right, so our board members should go ahead and log off this session and wait for that link and rejoin on that link. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mary Kate.
Great.
Sorry, I was still on no volume from the last session. Perfect, thank you. I will start with a roll call. Amy?
Here.
Robert?
Here.
Londe? You can circle back. Sylvia?
Here.
Marisol?
Here.
Catalina?
Here.
Debbie?
Here.
David?
Here.
Sean?
Here.
Chris?
Here.
John Hetz? We'll circle back. Jackie?
Here.
Sujin?
Here.
Michelle Reyes for John Laird? Circle back. Meredith?
Here.
Jessica?
Here.
John Ohanian?
Present.
Perfect, thank you. Gavin?
Gavin's here.
Thank you. Javier? Tom
Here.
and Jerry.
Here.
Perfect. Circling back just in case, I'd like to ask if Londe has arrived. Okay. John Hetz.
Here.
Thank you. Michelle Reyes for John Laird. Okay. And Javier. Okay, so we have 3 members that are absent.
Okay, we're resuming at 2:38.
Great.
From our closed session, Robert, would you like to report out on anything from closed session?
Chair Fung, there is nothing to report from closed session.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and move to agenda item 16, consideration of development for a policy for requesting an increase to the executive director's salary. So I'll turn it over to Julia Blair.
Great, thank you very much. And sorry, that's a mouthful. The motion is going to be a mouthful too, should you choose to make it, but I will try to go over this quickly. So Education Code Section 10866 requires the governing board to appoint an executive officer, which is our executive director, to oversee the managing entity and to set the terms of employment, including annual compensation, commensurate with other like positions in state government. In the governing board's governance manual, consideration of an increase to the executive director's salary is included in the performance evaluation process. Under that process in the manual, in January, the ad hoc committee for the executive director evaluation will determine whether to recommend a salary increase. The committee chair will then provide any recommended adjustment to the executive director's compensation, along with a draft of the performance review to the governing board for discussion in closed session. Any adopted recommendation regarding compensation would then be submitted to the government operations agency. Bagley-Keene requires that as a general rule, all items on a meeting agenda be conducted in open session with specified exceptions. One of these exceptions is for the evaluation of performance of an employee. However, this exception does not include discussion of compensation of an employee, which must occur in open session. A recommended best practice for complying with Bagley-Keene, providing transparency and maintaining the confidentiality of the employee performance discussion is for the governing board to adopt a clear policy regarding the consideration of an increase to the executive director's salary. A policy setting forth this process and criteria for when an increase will be considered, and any salary increase limits will provide objectivity, transparency, and avoid discussion of performance during an open session. While there are few publicly available policies for other public entities in the state, such as UC and CalPERS, these policies are based on additional considerations and law that are not applicable to C2C and are more complicated than what I would recommend. By authorizing 2 board members to work with me to develop a proposed policy for governing board consideration, that will ensure that we comply with Bagley-Keene and that all board conversations regarding the development of the policy and the policy provisions itself occur in open session.
Thank you, Julia, for that background and overview of best practice. It's important for the board to operate with transparency, and I believe that this supports that goal. I'd like to go ahead and now open up to our board members for discussion. I'd like to hear your thoughts. I'm not seeing any hands. Seems like silence is assent. Julia?
So my recommendation is the board move to delegate to 2 governing board members, including the chair, to work with myself, C2C Council, to develop a proposed policy for the consideration of an increase to the executive director's compensation for consideration by the full board at the next governing board meeting.
Thank you, Julia, for the staff report and also for just putting all of that together for us. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and call for a motion as presented. We have
Also move.
I think we have a draft motion in the slides. No? There we go. So let's make sure we frame up the motion first. It's motion to delegate to 2 governing board members to work with C2C General Counsel to develop a proposed policy for the consideration of an increase to the executive director's compensation for consideration by the full governing board at the next meeting. So,
okay, now also move.
thank you, John. John for the first,
Second.
and Marisol for the second. And now it's time to go ahead and move forward with public comment. Mary Kate, could you help us with that?
Yes. So at this time, we will open it up for public comment. If any members of the public would like to make a comment, please use the hand button as we've done throughout this meeting. You will have 2 minutes to provide your comment, and just as the slide says, the board members and staff are limited in terms of what we can respond back to. At this time, I'm not seeing any hands raised from the public.
I see John Hett's hand. I don't know if that was from previously or if he wanted to add a comment.
I did have a question, but we jumped right to public comment. I just had a clarification on the motion. Is it too late for that clarification?
No, I think it's fine. We can amend it if we need to.
Okay. So the question I had, Julia, was that you had indicated that it would be 2 members, including the board chair.
Yes.
So one of those members is the board chair?
Correct.
Okay, but it's not specified in the motion.
I'll add that because that was the spoken motion that I recommended, unless the board would prefer to have it be 2 different board members and not include the chair.
Can we, Mary Kate, go back to the other slide and amend the motion?
I'm happy to move without amendment.
I appreciate the clarification. I was just wondering if it was 2 plus the board chair or 2 including the board chair. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And I see Jerry has a question, it looks like.
Yeah, so I may have missed this, but what was the reasoning behind 2?
Because Bagley-Keene requires that any meeting of 3 or more board members be publicly noticed. But if we have 2 board members working with staff, we can do that in preparation for the next meeting without violating Bagley-Keene.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, so the amended motion before us is what you see on the screen with the addition of, after where it says 2 governing board members, it would say governing board chair and board member to call out those 2 members with C2C counsel. And we had a first from John Ohanian still, and Marisol just confirming that.
Yes.
You were second. Okay. Now we can move, I think, to public comment.
Perfect. And we've had no movement on public comment throughout this time. If we want to give it another second, but I'm not seeing any hands raised.
All right, and we are kind of getting late in the day as well. So let's go ahead and move into a roll call vote. Mary Kate?
Amy?
Yes.
Robert?
Yes.
Londe? Sylvia?
Yes.
Marisol?
Yes.
Catalina?
Yes.
Debbie?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
John Hetz?
Yes.
Jackie?
Yes.
Sujin?
Yes.
Michelle Reyes for John Laird?
Yes.
Meredith?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
John Ohanian?
Yes.
Gavin?
Yes.
Javier? Tom?
Yes.
And Jerry?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, so just to count again, Mary Kate, was that 19?
That was Yes, 2 absences, that would make that 19, yes.
Great, thank you. So the motion carries.
Amy, did you want to ask for a volunteer so that I can work to set something up with 2 of you and somebody else to work on this?
With me and one other.
Yes.
Okay, so we're asking for 1 volunteer. Please submit your self-nomination to Mary Kate. Thank you, Julia. Alrighty, so that gets us, I think, to agenda item 17, which is future agenda items. And, you know, as I was listening to the various presentations today, I was really struck by a metaphor that I've heard Marianne use as a means of describing the true value behind the, Cradle to Career. It really involves this person who's lost their keys, and it's dark out. And so they're searching for them, and they search for them in places where there's light, from a lamppost. Of course, we are struck by this question of, are the keys there, or are they just looking there because there's light, right? So much can be gained by further illuminating the area so that we're not just looking at the one thing, hoping to find the keys, hoping to find the answers. What I see for the data system, we aim to connect that darkness between the lampposts to shed light, to improve acuity, to give perspective and gain insight by connecting these points of light, right? That's the true value of the data system, connecting light, connecting people with information, connecting, linking the separate data systems is an incredibly important underpinning of what we're doing. It's all about context. In today's meeting, I hope we all felt that sort of through line and from all of the different agenda items. It's really important for us to hear from Pamela and Dawn on administrative burden, our many presenters and students who deepened our understanding of the problem and how we can help, as well as Robert and Marianne, who provided important context around the work plan and the strategic planning efforts. From Dan on what is actually getting built, and from Ryan on our first dashboard, and from Shannon on how we're going to connect the data system with people. It's exciting with all of the work that we've heard about today, and it's starting to feel really real. So I want to express appreciation for all of our presenters who are helping to connect the dots across all of these different work areas. It's a monumental, arduous undertaking. So again, coming back to context and connecting the dots, I think it would be great for us to hold space and to give our partner agencies an opportunity to step forward and provide context around their work on the data system as a future agenda item. So with that said, I'd like to take a moment to hear from our board members if they have future agenda items that they'd like to propose, and then we'll open it up for public comment. Jessica.
Hi, I'd like to, I guess, circle back to the comment I made earlier today regarding what the data, so you were talking a lot about how the Cradle-to-Career data set is really going to bring a lot of information, but of course, information wasn't the only administrative burden. There was also compliance. So I feel like there's a lot of opportunity for Cradle-to-Career to address the compliance piece by making it easier for potentially agencies to share data between themselves. I mean, that's a question, like, I'm not sure if that's in the current scope of Cradle-to-Career or something that maybe is going to have to be worked around it. But I think that's a very important thing to address, because it's a way that we as like data providers can start to really remove the barriers rather than just identifying them through the dashboards.
Thank you, Jessica. Next up, we have John Hetz.
Yes. My whole life, I've had to live through the identifying the last name. So I very strong second to everything that Jessica said. I would also like to ask for consideration for how information for the meetings are provided to the board members. So it would be very helpful to be able to, for example, have copies of the PowerPoints in advance. One of the things that we typically do for board members is for the California Community College's Board of Governors is provide those the Friday, the weekend before, so everyone has an opportunity to review. Speaking of burdens, it can be very difficult and challenging to process that amount of information rapid fire. So I find that very useful. And I would also addend that to ask that when we're having report outs from individuals from our subgroups, that they provide those in written form for some of the same reasons. For someone to want to know what they reported on, I don't think it's fair for people to go and have to go to that point in the recording to be able to see what was reported out from those subgroups or committees, and so that they are actually a part of the record.
Thank you, John. All right, and I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Next slide. Public comment.
We'll now open it up for public comment. If any members of the public would like to raise their hand, please do that using the button at the bottom of the screen. This would be your time if you'd like to offer any recommendations for future agenda items at our governing board meetings. I'm not seeing any hands. We'll give it another moment. There's a panelist hand.
CJ?
Hi, which this probably underscores John Hetz's comment about the needing time to process. I was thinking about public advocates as public comment on the teacher dashboard about the types of credential. And I was curious if that was something I would love to know, does that make sense to folks? I mean, it makes sense to me, but I don't know if that data should be something else that we'd consider adding as we're at this point of adding data to the teacher pipeline dashboard. If that's a next governing board meeting conversation or something that Marianne just wants to follow up with me separately, but I found that comment compelling.
Thank you, Sujan. So I think that what we're hearing is that we'd like to hear more about the detail around the dashboard and progress, specifically around some data points on the teacher side. All right, I'm still not seeing anything on the public comments side.
Correct.
Okay.
We'll close it.
All right, so next slide, please. So we've come to the end of our agenda for our board business. So before we adjourn, I'd like to thank Mary Ann and all the office staff for their assistance in bringing together a really meaningful board meeting today. And we sure had a lot of information to go through. And I think it will help us move forward together, having this shared understanding. And I'd like to recognize Mary Kate. Although this is her first board meeting, it sure feels like she's a total expert. So our next board meeting, once again, is in August. I'd like to thank our governing board and advisory board members and members of the public for leaning in and staying involved to help us make progress on the creation of this ambitious data system. Thank you so much for helping to make an impact, and we'll see you again soon. That said, if there are no objections, and seeing none, this meeting is adjourned at 2:56. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.